My wife started overspending and left the kids to go on a trip after I got promoted. Am I the asshole for filing for divorce and blocking her cards? My wife, Meredith, and I, both 38, have been married for the past decade and together for about 13. We've had a somewhat typical relationship, with no affairs or significant misunderstandings, and our families get along well together. We also have 2 amazing children, a 7-year-old girl and a 5-year-old son. We come from comparable financial backgrounds. Our parents raised us comfortably, but we weren't spoiled. I'm not sure how she got into the habit of being a spendthrift anytime she thought she could afford it, even if only a little. I believe that's been my main complaint about her during our relationship. She doesn't always realize that we shouldn't spend all of our money right away. She subscribes to the "it's just money" school of thought, which is something we've always differed on. However, it has never been a major issue for us to quarrel over, and we have nearly always ignored it. This became a big concern a year ago when I was promoted to CFO at my company, which came with a large compensation increase. Obviously, I informed Meredith of my expected salary, and I recall reminding her that just because I was getting a rise did not mean we should suddenly begin living above our means. I don't think she heard me, though, because she began splurging frequently shortly after my promotion. It began with buying sprees. She then began spending my money on nice items from well-known brands, even going so far as to redecorate our home. She got rid of all of our perfectly decent furniture so she could replace it with brand new, trendy pieces. You can imagine how much that must have cost me because she made no contribution to any of these expenses, despite the fact that she is a working woman. The main difference is that she is a high school teacher while I work longer hours in corporate. I have to admit that my wife handles most of the domestic tasks and spends the most time with our children. That was her initial defense. She expressed her dissatisfaction with working all day and felt entitled to a reward for her efforts. She reminded me that when I had to work late at night or travel regularly for work prior to my promotion, she was the one who held down the fort at home. With 2 young children, that was also a difficult chore. I understood where she was coming from, so even though I attempted to persuade her to cut back on her reckless spending, all I did was talk to her and hope she understood my worry. But she didn't, and things just got worse. She kept spending more money. I'm not a miser, but whenever I tried to talk to her about her spending habits, she treated me like one. She'd make me feel bad for attempting to stop her. We had recently fought a lot about our finances. Even though I was making decent money following my promotion, we hadn't been able to save much because of her extravagant spending. Then, last week, she pushed all boundaries. When I got home from work, I discovered that the babysitter had been summoned, and instead of Meredith, she was caring for the kids. I was obviously perplexed because we generally only contact the babysitter when both of us need to go out. Meredith hadn't told me about her plans for the day, which she generally does, even if it's only to meet friends for breakfast or something else. I do the same for her. I tried calling her several times but couldn't get through. I eventually asked the babysitter to clarify what was going on, and she informed me that Meredith had reportedly hired her to remain with the kids for a week, day and night. This made me even more bewildered, as I had no understanding what was going on. I let the babysitter handle the kids while I tried to phone Meredith and her parents, but neither of them answered. I even tried contacting her pals, but they had no idea what was going on either. After nearly 3 hours of attempting, she finally answered my call. I instantly placed her on blast because her behavior was so irregular, and I felt entitled to an explanation. She explained that she couldn't react earlier since she and her parents were on a flight. They had decided to take a family trip to Miami, so none of them could return my calls. She didn't think she needed to elaborate anymore. I had to ask her why she had left me and the kids behind to travel to Miami with her parents without first addressing it with me. I already knew she planned to stay for a week because the babysitter had told me. When I began questioning her, she did not take it well. Instead, she told me that I had no business referring to her in that manner because she had done everything in her power to secure her family's happiness. She felt it was time for her to do something for her parents as well. I attempted to tell her that I didn't mind her doing things for her parents, but the fact that she didn't think it was necessary to discuss it with me first worried me. That had been the situation for the previous year. She had never contacted me before making important financial decisions. She simply cut me off harshly, saying she needed and deserved a break, and hung up. I tried contacting her several more times, but she did not answer. That was the final straw for me. I had tolerated her conduct for a long time, but I couldn't take it anymore. I immediately made a couple calls to block her credit cards. Her personal card was the only one that continued to work. After confirming the cards were blocked, I began receiving phone calls and messages from her, but I turned off all notifications. I then called a buddy, who connected me with his divorce lawyer. I explained the scenario to the lawyer and requested him to begin drafting divorce papers for me right away because I'd had enough. 2 days later, Meredith returned home. When I answered the door, she instantly apologized for her actions. She claimed she had no idea how hurt I would feel. She claimed she took the next available aircraft back home as soon as she realized the enormity of her error. She claimed that she would have returned earlier, but storms had canceled all flights, forcing her and her parents to wait. Now that she was back, she stated she was willing to discuss and tell her side of the story so that we could work things out. It was too late, however. My lawyer had already delivered the divorce papers to me for signature the night before. I tossed the papers at her and told her she had to deal with them because I was done with her. While she was still reading the papers, I shut the door. A few seconds later, she began shouting at me, knocking on the door, and imploring me to open it. She continued saying that I could not do this to her. It hurt a lot to see her like that, but I honestly couldn't handle it any longer. Fortunately, our children did not have to witness their mother's emotional breakdown, nor did they have to see me ignore her. I'd sent them to stay with my parents for a few days, expecting that something like this would happen. Meredith continued to knock on the door for nearly 15 minutes before giving up and leaving, likely to return to her parents. She has been attempting to chat to me for the past week. I've muted her everywhere. I haven't blocked her because we still have the kids to think about, and even if I do, I'll have to unblock her someday, so it seems pointless. Out of curiosity, I read a few of her messages. It has been a mixed bag. Most of the time, she apologizes profusely, not just for the most recent episode, but for everything that has occurred. She has promised to attempt to curb her costs and be more responsible with our finances. However, her texts occasionally take on a different tone. She accuses me of being ruthless and says I can't waste 13 years of our relationship and a decade of marriage on this. She says that if I want to work things out, I must want to do so with her. She recently wrote me a message in which she acknowledged that I was upset with her, which was understandable, but reminded me that we have 2 children together and must consider their well-being. She accused me of being overly egoistic, stating I was only concerned with myself and my wrath, not the children. She went on to say that most people try to work through such issues before filing for divorce. For some reason, her message stuck with me, most likely because she mentioned the kids. Now I'm re-evaluating the entire scenario. I'm beginning to worry if I'm being too hard on her. The notion of divorce has also taken its toll on me, and I realize that I may not have been thinking about the children as much as I should have. I've been visiting them at my parents' house, trying to keep things under control, but I know they're unhappy. They will probably be even more sad without their mother in their life. Despite her flaws, Meredith is a good mother. She was not lying when she said she had always tried to make our family happy. Perhaps I am making a hasty decision by filing for divorce so quickly. Update 1. Hey, after reading the comments, I realize there are some topics I still need to talk with my wife before making such a big decision. Not just those in the comments, but also my friends and family, agree that chatting with her could be good. So, yesterday, I decided to contact her and offer to meet her for lunch and discuss. We opted to keep the kids out of it, despite the fact that she missed and wanted to see them. For practical reasons, I didn't think we'd be able to communicate effectively if they were present. I did, however, tell her that she was welcome to visit my parents whenever she wished. When we eventually met, it seemed weird at first. Then she went right in and started apologizing for everything. She stated her point of view and informed me that she thought I was always being frugal with money instead of simply trying to enjoy our life. She conceded, however, that she did have an issue with overspending and had been in denial about it for so long. She saw herself as the ideal wife and refused to accept that this was a problem she needed to resolve. She also said that because of my job, she often worried that I wouldn't be able to spend enough time with my family or at home. In some strange manner, she was simply trying to keep herself occupied since she was really lonely. That was something we'd discussed previously. As a high school teacher, her hours were relatively short, yet she spent the majority of her time at home each day. She didn't have many pals because her former friends were either busy during the week or spent weekends with their family. She expressed her desire to spend time with us because weekends were the only time I could be with the family. Because of this, she hasn't been able to form any significant connections in the 10 years after we married and had children. Whatever friendships she had before had begun to grow apart, and she now only saw those friends on occasion. She said that she thought that shopping would help her cope with her loneliness and boredom. Retail therapy was the one thing that made her happy. She became preoccupied with remodeling our home, going on shopping sprees, and making big purchases because it gave her something to focus on. For some reason, she felt like she was accomplishing something worthwhile with her time and money. The trouble was that she didn't realize she was beyond regular spending limitations, which is why we had so many conflicts. She really apologized and agreed that she should have told me about it. She found it quite difficult to admit to herself that this was a genuine problem. As she told me this, she began crying, and I realized how lonely she had gotten. It's true that after our marriage and having children, she had little time for herself. I had to admit that a big portion, if not all of this, was due to the sacrifices Mom had made for me and our family. When we had our firstborn, she spent less time with her friends and family because someone had to stay at home in the evenings to finish the task. I'd arrive home late, and it was nearly hard for me to divide the tasks or take over responsibility for our infant since I was so fatigued. When we had our second child, she went above and beyond to manage 2 children and the household so that I didn't have any problems. Of course, it was teamwork, but she was still on the team and performed admirably. As we talked, it dawned on me how much effort we had both put in over the last 10 years to secure our family's happiness. I concluded that I couldn't waste all of those years simply because I was sad. Yes, I was outraged and extremely wounded by her actions, but she saw the problem and was determined to change. I believed I owed it to her and our children to try to make our marriage work. I tried to console her while she was crying, telling her that I was willing to work on our marriage. However, I thought it would be best if we took a few days apart to cool off, and she agreed. We were both being realistic. After all, we had just had a massive dispute, likely one of the most serious in our relationship, especially because I had gone so far as to see a lawyer. That's a significant event, and I believed that taking some time apart to reflect on our behavior would be beneficial. I couldn't expect her to be away from the kids for too long, so I told her they were staying with her in-laws and she could visit whenever she wanted. She was pleased with the choice, and the meeting ended on a positive note. We also agreed to meet again exactly a week later. In the meantime, I intended to contact my lawyer to cancel the divorce procedures. Update 2. Hello, Meredith and I met again yesterday. We have been in touch for the past week, and we both acknowledge that our marriage is far from perfect. It hasn't been ideal in a long time, and we both agreed that we needed to work on it. We chose to attend a marriage counselor and committed to making it work. We agreed that it shouldn't be too difficult because we still love one another. As long as we can agree on one thing, we can overcome whatever obstacles that arise. This week apart provided me with valuable information and opportunity to ponder on my life. She wasn't wrong about anything. She was right when she stated I spent a lot of time at work, and she was also right about how much money she spent. We were both excessive in our own ways, and it had a negative impact on our marriage, to the point where we were thinking about divorce. That clearly has to change. As I said in my last update, I am grateful that so many individuals supported my decision. Of course, there are still others who believe I'm doing the wrong thing and have labeled me a doormat for even considering giving our marriage another chance after what she did. But that doesn't matter because she's the mother of my children and we've been together for a long time. One fight is insufficient to erase that. Besides, we're not only doing this for ourselves, but also for our kids. They definitely need both of us in their lives. I've already spoken extensively about my decision and discussed why I arrived at this determination. Neither of us was flawless, but now that we've identified the flaws on both sides, we're tackling them together. It is fine if this causes some people to be upset. After all, you only have the information I've provided, but I've been in this relationship for years and know this is the best way forward. I don't dismiss anyone's advice or life experiences, but a few people being dissatisfied with my decision on an online forum won't change or affect it. That is all. Having said that, I'm quite pleased with my choice. When Meredith and I met yesterday after our 1-week vacation, we were both in a much better mood. We hugged as soon as we saw each other, and that hug gave me confidence that I was doing the right thing. It was evident that neither of us were prepared to let go. She was the first true love of my life, and I have been the same for her. We just lost touch in our relationship while juggling professions, families, and other commitments. As folks say, life got in the way. But don't worry. She's finally moved back in. She returned this morning, and I also brought our kids home from my parents' house. Now we're all living together as one happy family under the same roof, and I hope to keep it that way for the rest of our lives. I know the last 2 weeks have been extremely difficult for all of us, particularly the children. At least Meredith and I are grown-ups who can manage our emotions better than they can. As much as my children adore their grandparents, they both missed us horribly. I could see the joy on their faces when we all got back together, and I never want to put them through something like this again. Knowing that I'm doing the best thing for my family makes it easier to forgive Meredith. During our chat yesterday, Meredith and I agreed that what she had done was wrong. She explained that the only reason she went without notifying me was that she knew I would be upset. She believed that as a grown woman, She shouldn't have to beg for permission from anyone. We worked through it, realizing that it wasn't about asking for my permission, but about being honest with me and thinking about our family, which she hadn't done. She apologized again, and I assured her that I was ready to go on and start again. That's how we got back together. Even today, a few hours later, when the kids had fallen asleep, we spoke again. She apologized to me for being so insensitive, particularly during the last year. She burst into tears again, and I soothed her. We made several pledges to each other. This time, we're determined to keep our pledges and not forget about each other, or our children, while living our lives. That was the worst mistake we've ever made, and we're determined to avoid it again. Update 3. It's been almost 6 months since my previous update. I purposefully waited until now to post anything because, even after my last update, many people questioned whether this would work. Some accused me of being a doormat, or a pushover, because I gave my wife another chance. A few even took the time to contact me directly to express their thoughts. None of this matters now. We've been attending couples counseling for 6 months and are actively working on our issues. Guess what? It has been working in our advantage. We've never been happier together, and the kids are doing great as well. We're no longer constantly arguing or making subtle jabs at each other without recognizing it. We had no idea how much our behavior had been harming the children until we began addressing it. We've been working on it slowly as well. Instead of suppressing our frustrations and acting out like children, we began communicating directly with one another. That's made all the difference. Of course, we still need to put in effort. Sometimes it's important to keep our cool, but other times it's better to let it all out and have a genuine disagreement. But, at the end of the day, we're still together and have always been able to work through our differences. That is what is actually important to us. Everyone in our lives is relieved we did not go through with the divorce, especially our parents. Initially, they weren't completely opposed to the idea, but they eventually concluded it would be too severe. Honestly, I don't think obtaining a divorce would have made either of us happy. We'd both be miserable. That being said, remaining together isn't for everyone, but it was the greatest option for us. I have maintained all of my vows to Meredith, and she has kept hers to me. I've reduced my job hours and am trying to spend more time with my family. We've been going on weekend getaways, having supper together, and spending time with the kids. I'm gradually discovering how much I've been losing out on, and frankly, I don't believe the rat race is worth sacrificing family for. This change may have an impact on, or possibly slow down, my professional development. I am not concerned about being passed over for future promotions. I'll devote as much time to work as required, but I won't allow it consume my life. Meredith has also started to live a more fulfilling life. Instead of devoting all of her time to her family and then splurging all at once, she has begun to spend time with her friends and pursue new interests. She now prioritizes self-care, which has been a nice adjustment. She appears to be a lot happier and is no longer prone to overspending. In short, we're all happier than we were 6 months ago, or even before that. We're all really delighted we decided to keep together. Update 4. Hello everyone. It has been almost a year since my last post, and in a few weeks, Meredith and I will be throwing a party and ceremony to reaffirm our marriage vows. The last few months have been incredible, so we decided it's the perfect moment to renew our vows. This ceremony will be far grander than our previous wedding. When we married, we were both just starting out in our careers and relied largely on our parents to finance the wedding costs. We couldn't make it too enormous, as it would have been unreasonable. This time, however, we are splurging a little, and happily, we agree on it. We've earned this. But it isn't the finest part. Meredith gifted me with a set of really costly platinum cufflinks yesterday. She explained that she had meant to wait until the wedding to give me her gift, but she couldn't wait to see the expression on my face. For the fact, they were extremely expensive, and she makes significantly less money than I do. It wasn't about the material value of the present, it was about its sentimental significance. I knew it would have burned a hole in her purse, but she went ahead and did it. She told me she was grateful to have me in her life because she thought any other man in my position would not have taken her back after what she had done. But I did. I placed her and the family first. She wanted me to know how grateful she was for everything I did for her, and the cufflinks were her modest mark of appreciation. I'm not normally an emotional guy, but I ended up crying since our relationship has been a long road, and we've finally arrived at a point when everything feels perfect. Also, I'm not complaining, but most of the time, I've been the one to give such expensive gifts. Not just to Meredith, but to everyone in my family. I had never been on the receiving end before, so this was a big deal for me. I told Meredith just how grateful I was for her. I also told her that, at the end of the day, we're a team, and our priority will always be family. I told her, and I will say it again. I am grateful to have her in my life. Parents neglected me my whole life, never noticed I moved away, and now they're demanding I return to take over their responsibilities. I'm the youngest of 5, and when I say youngest, I don't mean by a small margin. There's a 7-year difference between me and my next sibling. To be honest, I always felt invisible growing up. My brothers all had their own problems, and I believe my parents assumed that because I wasn't sick or struggling with mental health difficulties like the rest of them, I didn't need them. I'm not trying to play the victim, but this is the truth. The others were constantly in and out of hospitals, attending treatment sessions, and so forth. Meanwhile, I was right there. They call it the glass child, right? You can see me, yet you don't seem to see me. For the most part, I was okay with it. I spent a lot of time alone, playing video games, reading, and keeping to myself. I had to learn how to entertain myself because there was no one else there to do it. It wasn't like I was supposed to care for my siblings or anything. Other individuals have told me that they had to give up their childhoods to care for their siblings and sisters, but that was not the case with me. My folks handled everything, so give credit where it's due. But because I wasn't making problems or living in perpetual crisis mode like my siblings, I sort of slipped through the cracks. I didn't need aid, so I didn't get it. I don't believe my parents did it on purpose. It's simply that when you have 4 children coping with health issues, the healthy one becomes an afterthought. They were constantly so preoccupied with hospital visits, doctor's appointments, and school meetings for the others that I became the kid who didn't cause trouble, and thus didn't get noticed. I was invisible, not in tragic movie scenes, but in a practical we've got our hands full way. When I was approximately 9, I made 2 friends, Mia and Clara, who were in essentially the same situation. Their families were not wonderful either, and we just discovered each other in an unsaid way. We clicked. We knew what it was like to be neglected or left out, and that connected us. They grew to resemble my genuine family more than my own family ever did. We were inseparable throughout high school and remained so even after graduation. We attended college together, graduated together, and then moved to a new state together. It was as if we had created our own small family out of the scraps that our real families could not provide for us. After I left home, my parents and I didn't talk much. That wasn't surprising given how seldom we chatted while I was still living there. My mother would occasionally text me, primarily with small conversation like, "How's school?" or "What are you doing for work?" Our connection was quite surface level, but it was an improvement over my teenage years. Back in high school, we scarcely spoke. I didn't expect much from them, nor did I ask for much. A phone call from my mother last year highlighted how distant I felt from my parents. It was a few days before Thanksgiving, and she called unexpectedly. We never called each other, so I knew something was amiss. I had last spoken to her on the phone about a year before. When she told me the time and location of one of my sister's funerals, I realized how little we had communicated. So she phones and asks what time I'm coming for Thanksgiving. I immediately sat there like, wait, what? Since I had no idea they were doing anything for Thanksgiving. It wasn't like we had a huge family tradition. In fact, in my entire childhood, I can recall only 3 occasions when they attempted to celebrate Thanksgiving or Christmas. It was simply not a thing in my family. I told her that I already had plans. I mean, I was going skiing with Mia and Clara, so I couldn't simply drop everything and come over. Plus, I live 2 states away, and if I were going to come, I would have had to purchase a plane ticket months in advance. But she acted as if I was simply being tough. Then Mother started guilt-tripping me, saying she was going to be alone because my father was going to spend the day seeing my brother in the institution. The institution is a 2-hour drive away, so my father would be gone for the majority of the day. I got it. But she gave me 3 days' notice. 3 days. And I was expected to simply show up and make her feel better? I told her I couldn't come, and she got upset, saying I didn't care about the family or whatever. I emphasized that I already had plans, and she hung up on me. After the call, I sat there for a while, feeling both guilty and irritated. Like, I hadn't heard from them in ages, and now I'm the bad guy for not returning home for Thanksgiving? I scanned over our past texts to ensure I hadn't missed anything, but there was no mention of Thanksgiving or wanting to see me. She threw it on me at the last minute, as if I was meant to drop everything and go. I ended up texting her later that night, stating that I had a ski trip planned for Christmas and wouldn't be able to attend, but I'd love to get up with her and Dad after the new year. You know, trying to be polite about it. She didn't respond. I was still trying to shake off the strange feeling a few days after Thanksgiving. You know when something just bothers you and you can't figure out why? That's how I felt about my mother's attempt to make me feel awful for not coming home. She phones me out of nowhere and guilt trips me for not being there, but she never told me they were celebrating Thanksgiving. It was as if they expected me to be a mind reader. Anyway, by then, I'd very much moved on. I was preparing for a ski trip with Mia and Clara. We had been planning it for months, and I was quite enthusiastic. The three of us hadn't taken a good vacation in a long time, so we were excited to just hang out and relax. Then, out of nowhere, I received this text from my father. Now, my father rarely texts me, so I assumed it would be crucial. Instead of saying something fair, he says, "If you don't come home for Christmas, I'm stopping your college payments." At first, I laughed. Like, what? I graduated 3 years ago? What are my payments? It was so unexpected that I had to read it again to ensure I hadn't missed anything. I wondered if he was confused or talking about someone else. So I texted him back, informing him that I had already graduated and that if he thought he was still paying for my tuition, he should check his bank account because someone was scamming him. I assumed that would be the end of it. Honestly, I expected him to feel silly once he realized I wasn't in school anymore. But no. A few hours later, he sends me another text, this one accusing me of being greedy and ungrateful. He said a lot about how much they had sacrificed for me and my brothers, and how I didn't appreciate any of it. Okay, first of all, I never asked them for anything. Second, I had no idea they were paying for my college because my grandmother had already covered it. She told me straight out that she didn't want my parents to interfere with my education, so she took care of everything herself. So, obviously, I had no idea what my father was talking about. At this point, I'm pretty angry. Like, I get if they're stressed out about my siblings, but guilt-tripping me over something they didn't do? That's an entirely new level. So, I responded back as politely as I could, saying something like, "I'm sorry you feel that way, but Grandma paid for my college. I'm happy to catch up after the holidays, but I already have plans." I assumed that would shut it down. But no, my father chooses to go full drama mode and starts texting me about how I've abandoned the family, how I'm turning my back on them, and that he's done helping me if I don't make an effort. By this time, I'm just gazing at my phone, like, what is going on? Have you abandoned the family? I've been living alone for years, and they haven't even noticed. And now I'm the terrible person because I refused to drop everything and rush back for Christmas. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I became increasingly irritated as I thought about it. It was as if they hadn't spoken to me in months, hadn't bothered to check in or ask how I was doing, but when they needed something, it was my obligation to put things right. I was supposed to be their backup, or something. I called Mia and Clara to vent. They both agreed that it sounded like my parents were only using me as a guilt trip. Mia said that they probably wanted me back home for Christmas so they wouldn't feel awful about themselves, not because they wanted to see me. Clara, as usual, did not hold back and bluntly stated, "Screw them, you don't owe them anything." I chose to sleep on it and cool off before answering again. But as I lie there, my phone vibrates again. It's my father. This time, the text is brief and frigid. He says, "If you don't come home, don't bother coming back at all." I read that and felt completely numb. So, how did we get here? How did we go from not speaking for months to virtually disowning me because I wasn't coming to Christmas? It did not even feel real. I looked at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to retaliate and say something horrible. I wanted to confront them about all the times they disregarded me and made me feel as if I didn't exist in that house. However, I did not answer. I put down my phone, rolled over, and attempted to sleep. I didn't want to be dragged into any major family turmoil just before the holidays. I didn't want to cope with the guilt trips, accusations, or whatever else they could throw at me. So I just left it. The next morning, I received more texts, this time from my mother. She didn't say much, just that they were disappointed in me, didn't understand why I was so aloof, and hoped I would reconsider. I couldn't help but giggle a little because far away didn't begin to describe it. I'd been distant all my life, and they were only now noticing? I ignored the texts again and concentrated on preparing for the ski trip. Mia and Clara were excited, and I was too. It felt like the ideal vacation from all the family drama. We left the next day, and for the first time in a long time, I forgot about my parents. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel sorry. I simply felt free. Of course, things couldn't remain peaceful indefinitely. Just when I thought I'd moved on, I received another message from my mother, this time in the middle of the journey. She was not giving up. She stated that if I did not return home soon, they would have to begin making decisions about the future without me. Decisions that I would not like. That's when something clicked. They were planning something greater than Christmas. Perhaps it had to do with one of my brothers or something about the house. I had no idea what was going on, but it soon became clear why they were pushing so hard. They wanted me back for more than simply the holidays. That knowledge felt like a punch in the belly. All this time, I assumed they were just clinging or lonely. But this was never about me. Not really. It was about what they could get out of me. I was finished. So after that whole drama with my folks trying to guilt trip me, I assumed things would calm down. I ignored their texts, went on the ski vacation, and tried to remember that I had my own life and goals, and I was not going to let them drag me back into their world of guilt and expectations. But, of course, it was not so easy. I was back home, just getting back into my routine, when I received a message from my older brother Jake. Now, I hadn't spoken to Jake in months, probably longer. Jake was the one sibling who, as we grew older, I thought would understand me. He wasn't as sick as my other brothers, so I always assumed we may have had something more. But he was always too caught up in his own life. Whatever. Anyway, seeing his name appear on my phone astonished me. His message was straightforward. "Hey, we need to talk." I had no idea what he wanted, but I was not in the mood for more family turmoil. I said, "About what?" A few minutes later, he calls me. I contemplated whether to respond, but curiosity got the best of me. So I pick up the phone, and before I can say hey, Jake dives right into it. "Mom and Dad have been talking about making you the legal guardian for one of the boys when they're gone." I swear I almost dropped my phone. My heart was beating, and I sat there shocked for a few seconds. Was this some sort of joke? Like, after all these years of hardly being present in my life, they're just going to put this obligation onto me? "What the hell are you talking about?" I eventually managed to ask. Jake sighed, as if I were the one acting ridiculous. "You know how things are with Mom and Dad. They've got a lot on their plate with the other boys, and they're not going to be around forever. They need to know someone's going to step up and take care of things when they're gone." I could feel my blood boiling. And they think that someone is me? After everything? After all the ignoring and guilt tripping, they just assume I'm going to drop everything and take over their mess. Jake didn't seem to get why I was unhappy. "Look, I know it's a lot, but you're the only one who's really stable. The rest of us, we've got our own issues." I nearly laughed. "Yeah? Well, maybe you guys should have thought about that before now. I didn't even know this was a thing." "They never told me they were going to talk to you about it," said the man, "but I figured you should know before they tried to spring it on you." I was pissed. This wasn't just about Christmas or Thanksgiving anymore, it was bigger. They were preparing something long-term, and they hadn't thought to contact me until now, when it was convenient for them. They hadn't spoken to me in years, and now they expected me to take responsibility? Number just no. "So, what? They've been discussing this behind my back?" I questioned, still trying to figure it out. "Like they just decided I'd take on the responsibility without even asking me?" "Yeah, pretty much," Jake agreed. "They've been planning it for a while." I sat in silence for a minute, staring at the wall and trying to digest everything. Part of me wanted to shout at Jake, but I knew it wasn't his fault, he was simply the messenger. But that didn't change the fact that my parents were ready to screw me down big time. They weren't simply asking for a favor, they asked me to spend the rest of my life cleaning up after them. I was done being invisible, but I wasn't going to be their backup plan now. "So, what am I supposed to do?" I inquired, feeling more discouraged than anything. "Just drop my whole life and move back home? Give up everything I've worked for?" Jake did not have an answer for that. He attempted to talk about how difficult things were for our parents, how they were straining to keep up with my brother's care, but I didn't care. I had spent my entire life being shunted to the sidelines because I was not a problem. Now they wanted to utilize me since I was the only one who had my life in order. It was unfair. "I'm not doing it," I responded, interrupting him mid-sentence. "I'm not going to be their backup. They didn't give a crap about me for the last 25 years, and they sure as hell don't get to make me responsible for everyone now." Jake remained silent for a moment, then said, "I get it. I do. But you're still part of the family." Family. This word made me want to shout. Yes, I was a member of the family, but only when it was convenient for them, only when they needed it. When I was younger, they didn't care if I was fine or if I needed assistance. But now that they were afraid of what the future contained, I was exactly what they needed. "Tell them I'm not interested," I replied. "And don't bother calling me about this again." I hung up before Jake could reply. For a long, I sat there, staring at the phone, trying to relax. I felt as if my entire life had been leading up to this moment, this time when I'd finally had it. Enough with the guilt trips. Enough with the deceptive texts. Enough with being ignored and then used. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. Jake and my parents did not contact me for several days. It was almost as if they were waiting for me to wake up, to alter my opinion, and to be the good daughter they had suddenly decided I should be. But I wasn't about to move. I was not going to let them throw their issues on me simply because I was the last one standing. Then a letter arrived in the mail. It was from my mother. She hadn't even called. She had simply sent a letter, as if we were living in the 1800s or something. The letter was lengthy and rambling, full of the same guilt-tripping nonsense I'd heard before. She went on about how much they needed me, how difficult things were for them, and how they had no idea what they would do if I didn't help. The final part, however, irritated me greatly. My mother wrote, "We're not asking for much, Olivia. We just need to know that when we're gone, someone will step up for the family." That's when I recognized what this was all about. They didn't care about me. They just worried about making sure their mess was cleaned up after they left. They didn't want me back because they miss or love me. They wanted me because I was convenient and the only one who hadn't broken apart. I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. I was finished. Update 1. After receiving that letter from my mother, I believed I had reached my limit. What else could they throw at me that I hadn't seen? I was already tired of their guilt trips, manipulations, and attempts to hold me accountable for their mess. But of course, I was mistaken. It wasn't finished, not even close. A week or two after I discarded the letter, I received another call. This time, it came from a number I did not recognize. I almost didn't pick up, but something inside me was intrigued. Maybe it was Jake again, or one of my parents trying a different number after I ignored theirs. Regardless, I took up. "Hey, Olivia, it's Sarah." Now Sarah is one of my sisters. We were never very close. I mean, she was constantly dealing with her own issues, hospitals, therapists, everything. I felt sorry for her growing up, but I didn't truly know her. We were essentially strangers living under the same house. So hearing from her now, after everything, seems strange. Hey, I replied, unsure where this was going. "Look," she said. "I know things have been kind of rough between you and Mom and Dad, but I really need you to listen to what I'm going to say." I could already feel my stomach dropping. I thought, here it comes. Increased guilt. More attempts to draw me back in. "What is it?" I inquired, attempting to seem impartial while bracing myself for whatever was coming. She took a big breath and said, "They're not doing well. Like, really not doing well. Dad's health is going downhill fast, and they're freaking out because no one's stepping up to help with the boys. They're scared, Olivia. They don't know what to do." I did not say anything for a second. It's not that I didn't care. I did. I did not want to see anyone suffer, including my parents. But after everything, after years of them not caring about me, I couldn't simply jump in and fix things for them. I was not their band-aid. "I'm sorry to hear that," I stated with great care. "But I can't just drop everything. I have a life too, Sarah." She sighed, clearly frustrated. "I get that, but you're the only one who's in a position to help. Jake's barely holding it together, and you know what's going on with me and the others. There's no one else, Olivia." Desperate because they ignored this for years, I shot back, feeling my fury rise again. They let this all build up, thinking it would just go away. And now, because I'm the one who managed to get out and make something of my life, it's my responsibility. That's not fair, Sarah. "I know it's not fair," she continued slowly. "But this is where we are. They need help." And there it was again. Same old story. Same old guilt. No matter what I did or how far I tried to get away from it, they always found a way to bring me back. I could feel the strain growing inside me, the fury and animosity that had been simmering for years coming to a head. "I'm not doing it," I responded, my tone harder than intended. "I'm not going to be the one to clean up their mess. They didn't care about me when I was a kid, and they sure as hell don't get to come to me now just because it's convenient. I've got my own life. They need to figure this out themselves." When Sarah spoke again, I could tell she was hurt. "I get it, Olivia. I really do. But this isn't about you or me. It's about the family. It's about what's going to happen to the boys when they're gone. If we don't step up, who will?" That hit me hard. Not because I suddenly felt responsible, but because it reminded me of how imprisoned we all were. My parents had neglected me for years, forcing me to the sidelines, and now they were attempting to use me as an escape plan. And what about my siblings? They were caught in the thick of it all, just like I was. Only they lacked the strength to fight back. "I'm sorry," I repeated, gentler this time. "But I can't. I won't." There was a long silence, and I could sense her disappointment over the phone. But I was not going to give up. Not this time. I could not. Okay. She finally said, her voice lifeless. I'll tell them. She hung up before I could say anything further. I sat there for a while, staring at my phone, feeling both relieved and guilty. I was well aware that I owed nothing to my parents. But it still ached. It stung knowing that my family was falling apart and that I had no control over it. Perhaps I wasn't powerless. Perhaps I was no longer willing to sacrifice myself for them. A few days later, I received another letter from my mother. This time, things were considerably worse. She didn't even bother with greetings. She went straight to the guilt trip. She wrote about how disappointed she was in me, how I had let the family down, and how she couldn't believe I would abandon them in their time of need. She tossed in a lot of things about how difficult it was for her and my father, how much they'd suffered for us, and how she didn't know what she'd done to deserve such a selfish daughter. It was brutal, and for a little while, it worked. I felt that old, familiar sting of shame, the guilt I had felt my entire childhood. But then I remembered all the years I'd spent being invisible, all the times they'd forgotten about me, and all the times I needed them but they weren't available. And I knew it wasn't because they needed aid. This was about control. This was about them attempting to draw me back into their web, making me feel as if I owed them something. But I owed them nothing. Not anymore. I crumpled the letter and put it in the trash, just like the previous one. I was finished. I was done being their pawn. I was done allowing them to influence me. I had my own life now, and I was not going to let them take it away. The following day, I blocked their numbers. I also blocked Jake, just to be cautious. It was not an easy decision, but it was the only one that seemed right. I couldn't keep letting them bring me down and make me feel responsible for their troubles. They'd made their decisions, and now they had to live with them. For the first time in a long while, I felt liberated. Update 2. Blocking their numbers seemed like a relief, like a big weight had been removed from my shoulders. For the first time, ever, I had control of the situation. I wasn't sitting there expecting another guilt-inducing message from my mother or a surprise call from Jake. It was quiet. Peaceful. But, of course, that did not endure. About 2 weeks after I blocked them, I received a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and honestly, I assumed it was a delivery or anything. But, as I opened the door, there she was, my mother. Standing on my porch, as if she had every right to be there. I'm not sure how she found me. I hadn't exactly been hiding, but I didn't expect her to just walk up at my apartment. She looked different. I suppose I'm older now. Or perhaps it was just stress. In any case, I could see she'd had a difficult time. But I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. "What are you doing here?" I inquired, keeping my voice as calm as I could. She did not respond right away. She stood there staring at me as if she didn't recognize me. Eventually, she spoke. "We need to talk, Olivia?" I exhaled. "No, we really don't. I've said everything I needed to say. I've made my decision." She took a step forward, as if she was about to enter, but I stood in the doorway and blocked her. I was not going to let her in and turn this into another guilt trip. "Please, just listen," she continued, her tone softening. "Your father's getting worse. He's in and out of the hospital, and we don't know how much time he has left. I don't know what to do, Olivia." There it was. The card she'd been hoping to play. The "your father is dying" card. She didn't state anything directly, but I knew she was hinting at it, and I am not heartless. I did not want my father to suffer. But after everything they'd put me through, I couldn't just abandon everything and rush to their side. "I'm sorry," I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady. "But this isn't my problem. You and Dad have had years to figure this out. You can't just show up now and expect me to fix everything." She looked at me as if I had hit her. "I'm not asking you to fix anything, I just need you to be there, for the family." "For the family?" I asked, nearly laughing. "What family? The one that ignored me for 25 years? The one that only talks to me when they need something? That's not a family, Mom. That's just manipulation." Her eyes widened, and I wondered whether she was going to disagree with me. But instead, she started crying right there on my doorstep. She burst into sobs, and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't going to welcome her in, but I also couldn't stand there and watch her cry. "Look," I whispered softly. "I completely understand how difficult this is for you. But I am not your backup plan. I'm not the person who will step in and make things right. You made your decisions, and now you must live with them." She dried her eyes and looked up at me, and I could see the rage begin to replace the sadness. "We did our best, Olivia. You don't comprehend what it was like to raise all of you and deal with everything. We didn't have time for you since we were focused on keeping everyone else alive. There it was. This is the excuse. I had heard the same excuse a million times before. And that's not my fault, I added, my voice firmer. You made the choice to have 5 children. You choose to focus on everyone else and leave me behind. It was your decision, not mine. And now you're making me feel guilty about it? I will not do that, Mom. I will not. She stood there for a long time, not saying anything and staring at me as if she didn't recognize me anymore. And perhaps she didn't. Maybe in her mind, I was still the tiny kid she could overlook because I wasn't causing a problem. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I was done being invisible. Eventually, she spoke. Is that it? Will you simply ignore us? I shake my head. Number you turned away from me a long time ago. I'm finally walking away. She had nothing to say about that. She just turned and walked away, returning to her car. I watched her leave, experiencing an odd combination of feelings. Part of me was sad, but the majority of me felt liberated, as if I'd finally let go of something I'd been holding for years. Something I should have let go of long ago. After she departed, I went back inside and sat down, trying to digest what had just transpired. I wasn't angry anymore. I was not even hurt. I was just finished. I'm done with the guilt, the manipulation, and the continual feeling that I wasn't enough. I was not going to be their backup plan. I was not going to be their last option. I had my own life to live, and I was not going to let them drag me down any longer. The following couple weeks were quiet. I didn't hear from anyone, no calls, letters, or anything. And, honestly, that was the best I had felt in a long time. I focused on my career, my friends, and my life. I wasn't glancing over my shoulder, waiting for their next communication. I was no longer living in the shadow of their expectations. Then, approximately a month later, I received an email. This time, it's from Jake rather than my mother or father. It was brief, only a few sentences, but it contained everything I needed to know. Dad passed away last night. I thought you should know. I stared at the email for a long time, unsure how to react. I wasn't astonished. I knew it was coming. But I did not feel sorry either. I didn't feel much of anything. I considered answering. I considered calling Jake, asking how he was doing, and maybe even giving my condolences. But then I realized that this was simply another stage in the same cycle. Another opportunity for them to bring me back in. And I was not going to fall for it this time. I closed the email without responding and continued on with my day. I wasn't a part of their world anymore, and I was finally comfortable with it. My wife forgot our anniversary, so I didn't pick her up at the airport. Am I the asshole for not forgiving her despite her later apology? My wife forgot our anniversary, so I decided not to pick her up at the airport. I am a 23-year-old male married to Sarah, 25. We've been together for 5 years, and I'm reaching a breaking point. Let me set the stage. It's our 5th wedding anniversary. You'd think that after 5 years of marriage, some recognition of the milestone would be expected, right? I had been dropping hints for weeks, saying things like, I can't believe we've been married for 5 years, or, do you think we'll do anything special for our anniversary this year? She responded distractedly, as I expected given her hectic schedule. Then the day arrived, and everything went as usual. She didn't say anything. There were no flowers, no meal, and no mention of our anniversary. I mean, I had gone all out every year before, organizing surprise dinners, writing meaningful messages, and sending thoughtful gifts. But over the past few years, it seemed like I was the only one making an attempt. So I brought it up. I said something like, hey, I suppose we aren't celebrating today? She just laughed it off, saying, oh, we'll do something later. Don't worry. But later never arrived. The day went without her realizing it. I felt hurt and irritated. I've put so much into this marriage, and now here I am, feeling forgotten on our anniversary. Then things began to spiral. She had a business trip arranged for the same week, departing on the 14th and returning the following evening. She asked me to bring her up from the airport, as usual. At first, I hesitated. I had been giving passive-aggressive indications about my feelings, but she didn't appear to notice. Instead, she kept making jokes about how weary she was from the trip and how excited she was to be home, without mentioning the anniversary. It was all about work, and everything seemed okay. Frustration built up. I had been doing all the emotional work, making every special occasion memorable, while she was constantly distracted or preoccupied. That night, after lying awake for several hours, I made a decision. I was not going to pick her up at the airport. I wasn't about to reward her contempt for me. Maybe if I stopped being so accommodating, she'd realize how much she took me for granted. I did not text her, call her, or do anything. When she gave me the normal message with her flight information, time, gate, and ETA, I didn't answer. I did not even acknowledge it. It felt empowering to simply not care, even if only for a moment. I spent the day doing my own thing, treating myself as I deserved, with no regard for Sarah's flight or her return. Around 8 p.m., I began receiving texts from her, one after the other. She started phoning over and over. I simply ignored it. A part of me felt bad, but the majority of me felt strangely satisfied. Sarah was stranded at the airport with no one to pick her up, and I wasn't going to be the dutiful husband anymore. She could figure things out. Finally, about an hour later, after ignoring her calls for what seemed like an eternity, I texted her. "Oh, sorry. I completely forgot you needed a ride. This happens from time to time. I confess it was a touch petty, and I'm not proud of it. But, after 5 years of always putting her needs first, I finally broke." The remarks were almost too sweet, full of irony. I knew it would enrage her, and that's exactly what occurred. The next text I received was a series of heated rants, calling me selfish and reckless. She went on about how I was overreacting and being childish. I didn't care. The following several hours were a haze. She eventually found her way home, and as she came through the door, there was a chill in the air. She scarcely acknowledged me. She was still angry and sulking, and I didn't care anymore. I went to bed early that night and left her to her thoughts. The following day was no better. Sarah did not even apologize. She made the same old excuse about work being stressful, claiming she had just lost track of things. But I wouldn't have it. I wasn't going to let her brush everything under the rug anymore. I wanted her to admit she had messed up. I wanted her to understand what she'd done. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the sense that nothing would change. So I let her be angry. And me? I felt an odd combination of remorse and delight. I have no idea where this will lead, but I know I can't go back to the way things were. Something has to give. Update number 1. After I texted Sarah about forgetting to take her up, I didn't hear from her for a while. But, oh, when I did, it was not pretty. She started texting and calling repeatedly. I ignored each one. Part of me wanted to just let her stew, but I kept my phone on silent, and hours passed. I wasn't going to rush to pick up the pieces because she was the one who had ignored me for so long. It wasn't until after 10 p.m., I eventually surrendered and checked my phone. I had missed perhaps 15 calls and at least 20 texts. Most of them consisted of her calling me petty, reckless, and juvenile. She was infuriated. The most memorable text was one that read, "You really had to leave me stranded? Is this how you treat me after all I've done for you?" I wasn't going to fall into that guilt trip. Instead, I said quietly, "Maybe now you know what it feels like to be forgotten." I didn't say anything else. I knew any additional explanation would be lost on her. Sarah attempted to defend herself as best she could. Her response was classic. "I apologize, okay? But I've been occupied with work. I did not mean to forget the anniversary. You know how hectic things have been recently." It was the usual excuse she had always used. Job stress. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I did not respond right away. I just let the silence linger between us. After a while, she got the hint. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized how deeply she'd been affected by the entire affair. Sarah waited at the airport for more than 3 hours. Apparently, she tried to phone me every half hour throughout that time. She couldn't catch a cab soon away because she didn't want to spend money on it. She eventually gave up and hired a cab, but by the time she arrived home, it was already past midnight. When she came through the door, I didn't welcome her or make small conversation. She did not even look at me. She simply went past me, dropping her suitcase on the floor. It was obvious that she was still irritated. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. She tried to talk, but it was more of a monologue about how unfair I was. "I worked hard, and this is how you treated me?" she inquired, her voice filled with frustration. But the excuses were no longer effective for me. I wasn't interested in hearing about how difficult her job was when I felt like I'd been carrying this relationship alone for months. The first night back was horrible. We did not converse much. The only time she looked at me was while I was preparing for bed. I could feel her stare at me, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I was not going to make the first move. The next day, Sarah tried to make things right by texting me and stating, "I've been working so hard lately, it simply slipped my mind." You know how it goes. Same old narrative, same lame excuse. At this point, it was clear she didn't get it. We scarcely communicated for the following 2 days. Every time we did it, she seemed to be walking on eggshells. She was passive-aggressive, and I was not about to back down either. I had made my point, and I was not going to let her convince me that everything was all right just because she offered a few meaningless apologies. It didn't help that her father became involved. He called to ask why Sarah had to take a cab home. He was concerned, of course, but it seemed like he was trying to guilt-trip me. "I can't believe you left her there," he said. "She's been working so hard, and you just let her figure it out on her own." I had no idea how to answer, so I didn't. I let the call finish and walked away. Later that evening, Sarah made an effort to apologize, but it was not real. It felt forced, as if she was saying sorry simply to relieve the tension. "I guess I could have done better, but you didn't have to leave me stranded," she replied. There was no true accountability, no understanding of why I was furious in the first place, only another deflection. I wasn't going to accept a half-hearted apology. I told her, "I'll get past this if you can acknowledge how I feel and start being more considerate. It's not only about the anniversary. It's about how you treat me overall." How did she respond? She accused me of overreacting. She claimed I was overreacting to the situation, but I refused to back down. After a few more days of stillness and tension, I decided to establish some boundaries. I wanted space to focus on myself, so I resumed my own activities. It was a comfort not to have to continuously attend to her moods. Sarah wasn't delighted with this, but she made one more effort to make things right. She made a dinner reservation for the two of us, stating it was to compensate for something. I wasn't sure if she truly believed it would heal things or if it was a last-ditch effort to escape true responsibilities. Regardless, I wasn't sure if it was enough. I was still waiting to see if she was truly going to change. Is this a serious attempt, or just another temporary fix that will come apart in a few weeks? Update number 2. Following the airport incident, Sarah determined to attempt to set things right. She made a dinner reservation at a restaurant, claiming it was to make amends for everything that had occurred. I won't lie. Part of me was cautiously optimistic. Maybe this was the moment she realized how much she had hurt me and decided to make an effort. But, as usual, this was not the case. Sarah texted me at midday on the day of the dinner to inform me that the reservation had been made for 7 p.m. I didn't sense any enthusiasm, I was simply going through the motions. Perhaps it was the fact that this wasn't our first attempt to settle things, or it was the nagging feeling in my gut that this supper would make no difference. Still, I got ready and decided to give it a shot. At least for one night, everything might be different. We got at the restaurant, and to my surprise, it wasn't as nice and private as I had imagined. Instead, it was a basic chain restaurant, the kind you go to for casual evenings when you don't want to put in too much effort. It wasn't even a place I enjoyed. I'd previously stated that I didn't like such types of places, but Sarah had chosen them regardless. I tried not to let it affect me, but it was difficult to ignore the lack of effort. It felt like she had chosen the easiest option, as if she couldn't be bothered to think about what I would want. The conversation began awkwardly. Sarah immediately began discussing how hard her job had been, going on and on about deadlines, meetings, and the amount of strain she was under. She didn't even recognize that she had missed our anniversary or left me stranded in the airport. Instead, she simply kept chatting about work. She said something about doing her best and being stressed out, but I couldn't help but think she was entirely missing the point. She had not apologized for the anniversary. She had not apologized for making me feel totally invisible. The more she discussed work, the more frustrated I felt. It wasn't simply that she was disregarding the larger issue. She didn't appear to comprehend how deeply her actions had hurt me. And it struck me harder than ever. In that moment, I recognized that this was not an isolated incident. This was a pattern. We were sitting there trying to have a great supper, but all I could think about was how disconnected she was from what was truly important. She didn't seem to get why I was wounded. It wasn't only about the anniversary. It was not only about the airport. It was about all the tiny things she had overlooked over the years, like the birthday surprises I arranged alone. She was too busy during the holidays, so we spent them apart. Our small conversation didn't last long, and things began to unravel. We had a minor quarrel about the food, but as often, it escalated into something more. She became defensive, arguing that I was being very picky and ungrateful. I attempted to clarify that it was not about the meal or the restaurant, but about everything else. That's when everything started to spill out. I told her how I felt ignored, and how she never seemed to put any effort into our relationship. I mentioned the anniversaries, birthdays, and quiet nights where I felt like a supporting figure in her life. Sarah, however, deflected rather than accepting responsibility. She began talking about how nobody's perfect, and how I should simply accept what I had. And there it was, The excuse I'd grown tired of hearing. Nobody's perfect. It was the mantra she usually said when things got tough, and this time was no exception. When the waiter came by to see if we needed anything else, I simply stared at Sarah. Her countenance was blank, and it was evident she was no longer listening. She made a token effort, offering me a small box of chocolates with a half-hearted smile. "Here," she answered. "This is for you. Sorry for everything. It was a lovely gesture, I suppose, but it felt insincere. A last-ditch effort to make things right without actually addressing the larger issues between us." I did not even want the chocolates. I was past the point of making little gestures. I needed something authentic. The remainder of the dinner was quiet, unpleasant, and full of meaningless platitudes. We scarcely chatted on the way home. I felt the strain in the car. Sarah was still unhappy, but I couldn't tell if she was upset with me for calling her out or with herself for not understanding why I was upset in the first place. It did not matter. Regardless, the silence was deafening. When we returned home, I couldn't shake the impression that nothing had changed. I thought that this time she'd understand. That it wasn't about the little things, but about the broader picture. But my hopes were dashed when I looked at her and realized she still didn't see it. Sarah began completing minor household chores over the next 3 days. She washed the dishes, helped with the laundry, and cleaned up. At first, I assumed this was a sign that she was attempting to change. However, it felt more like damage control than anything else. She wasn't doing these things because she truly wanted to. She was doing them because she knew I was furious and wanted to avoid a confrontation. I noticed myself emotionally distancing more and more. I couldn't help it. I did not want to keep being disappointed. I didn't want to keep waiting for her to change when it appeared she wasn't trying. I didn't want to fix someone who refused to meet me halfway. A friend of mine advised I provide Sarah an ultimatum. "Either she changes, or you walk away," he replied. It seems harsh, but perhaps it was the wake-up call she needed. I couldn't keep on like this, always wondering if she was going to make a genuine effort. Sarah's excuses piled up over time: work stress, deadlines. They were always her explanations for everything. I was beginning to notice a larger problem. Sarah didn't seem to realize the developing emotional distance between us. She assumed that performing the bare minimum would suffice, but I realized that wasn't the case anymore. I began to ponder about our future together. Was this relationship salvageable? I had no idea anymore. Update 3. After weeks of dealing with the same cycle, empty apologies, half-hearted attempts at change, and more excuses, I had reached my breaking point. I could not go on like this any longer. I had tried to be patient and give her opportunities to step up, but it was evident that Sarah didn't grasp it. So I decided to sit down with her and have the chat we should have had months ago. It was not easy. I'd been putting it off, hoping she'd figure it out on her own, but that wasn't happening. When she returned home from work one evening, I informed her that we needed to discuss. There was no way around this one. We sat in the living room, and I could immediately feel the tension rising. I didn't want to yell, but I couldn't hide my feelings any longer. I began by telling Sarah, "I can't do this anymore. This relationship has been one-sided for far too long. You've disregarded me, forgotten critical events, and never accepted responsibility for any of it." She only glanced at me, bewildered. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "I've been working so hard, and you're acting like I'm doing nothing." I took a deep breath and tried to remain cool. "It is not about your work, Sarah. It's about how you treated me. The anniversary. The airport incident. I've tried to make this relationship work for both of us, but you haven't even attempted to meet me halfway." Sarah instantly went on the defensive, as she usually does. "You're blowing things out of proportion," she continued, her voice rising. "You're acting like I forgot your anniversary on purpose. I didn't mean to forget, okay? I've been stressed out with work." Sarah responded with defiance. I was not buying it. "It isn't only the anniversary, Sarah. It is everything. It's every time you make me feel unimportant. Every birthday and holiday passes, and I'm the only one who makes an attempt." Sarah's face stiffened. "I am not perfect, okay? Nobody is perfect. Maybe you're just too demanding. I do what I can." She placed the responsibility back on me. "Perhaps you expect too much of me." Her statement made me even enraged. "I am not looking for perfection, Sarah. I am asking for basic consideration. I am seeking for respect. I'm asking you to care about our relationship in the same way that I do. But you don't, and that's what really hurts." The room fell silent for a minute. I could see Sarah wasn't expecting this type of discourse. She squirmed uneasily in her seat, obviously unsure how to answer. "I guess I could have done better," she said, But it was clear she didn't truly believe it. She didn't really accept responsibility for anything. She wasn't even apologetic. She was simply stating what she needed to say. "I'm not interested in hearing you say you could have done better," I stated calmly. "I need more than that. I need to know you understand it. I need to know you understand how much your negligence has harmed me, and I need you to demonstrate that you are prepared to make an attempt." Sarah avoided staring at me. I could tell she was uncomfortable, but I was not done. I had one final point to make. "How would you feel if the roles were reversed, Sarah? How would you feel if I forgot about our anniversary and left you at the airport?" For the first time in the conversation, she was silent. Her mouth opened, but no words emerged. I could see the wheels moving in her thoughts, and for a brief time, it appeared that the truth had finally been accepted. She didn't say anything for quite some time, and I let the stillness hang in the air. Finally, Sarah broke the pause with a low, "I'm not sure. I suppose I'd be pissed." I nodded. "Exactly. That is how I feel. That is how I have felt for a long time." I proposed something simple. Couples activities such as frequent date nights or simply spending time together to restore the connection we once had. I wanted to see if she was truly willing to put up the effort to alter things. "We can try it, but it will require work from both of us. I can't keep carrying this relationship by myself," I admitted. Sarah stared at me and hesitated for a second. "Okay, I'll try," she answered, but her tone was flat, as if she was simply repeating what she thought I wanted to hear. "I'm not sure whether date nights will solve anything, but I'll try." That was the lackluster response I expected. It felt more like a responsibility than a commitment. I knew I had to wait a few weeks to see whether anything would change. I couldn't simply accept her word for it. The conversation concluded on a tense note. Sarah did not appear convinced, and neither did I. We went to bed without saying anything more, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I kept wondering if Sarah's statements were sincere or if she was just saying anything to get me off her back. I chose to give it time, but I knew I couldn't wait forever. I had already invested so much in this relationship, and I wasn't sure how much more I could offer if nothing changed. I couldn't let myself become trapped in a cycle of disappointment and broken promises. So now I'm simply waiting to see if Sarah will make an attempt or if she'll revert to her old habits. I'm not sure what will happen, but I do know one thing. I'm not going to stick around for another false promise. Update 4. After that serious chat, things appeared to take a turn, for a time. Sarah tried harder. She actually organized a small date night for us, which included dinner at a local restaurant we both enjoyed. Nothing extravagant, but it did feel like an effort. She also began to assist around the house more, cleaning dishes without being asked, bringing out the garbage, and picking up groceries. Things appeared to be improving for about a week. I even began to wonder whether she was finally getting it. Maybe I was wrong about her. But during the second week, things began to return to normal. Sarah canceled a planned outing, claiming that work had piled up and she couldn't get away. Again, work stress was her go-to excuse. I tried to be understanding, but it was difficult not to perceive it as yet another meaningless excuse. I was frustrated. I had hoped that her efforts in the first week were meaningful, but they suddenly felt like a temporary fix. Something she did only to keep me quiet. The saddest thing was when Sarah forgot another milestone. She didn't recall the day we first met. It wasn't something big, just a minor detail that mattered to me. I mentioned it lightly, but she just shrugged it off as if it were no great deal. In that instant, I knew she was no longer trying to keep track of these things. She didn't care about the small things that used to matter to both of us. It was only me, attempting to hang on to whatever spark we had left, while she appeared to be losing interest. I began doubting everything. Did Sarah genuinely care about our marriage, or did she simply assume that I would always be there? She didn't appear to realize how much effort I was putting in, which hurt more than I'd want to admit. I wasn't sure if she still respected me or just took me for granted. One day, while cleaning up the living room, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. I found Sarah's calendar stashed beneath some papers on her desk. I don't typically rummage through her belongings, but something told me to look. I noticed the date of our anniversary marked on the calendar. But here's the thing, she still forgot it. It was as if she had prepared for it, made a note of it, but then forgot about it when it finally arrived. I was quite frustrated. Later that night, I confronted her, wondering why she had marked our anniversary yet still forgot about it. She made some poor excuse about forgetting to check her calendar that week. That is what she said, as if it were an innocent mistake. It was not a mistake. It was plain negligence. When I looked at the calendar more thoroughly, I realized what had actually been prioritized. There were work obligations, sporting events, and weekend vacations with pals, but almost nothing about us. Our relationship seemed to have slipped under her notice. I had understood that work was always her top priority, but seeing it set out like that stung me harder than intended. I had tried so hard to keep things going between us, but it seemed like she couldn't be bothered. The final straw arrived a few days later. I overheard Sarah on the phone with a friend, discussing a weekend trip they were arranging for a sporting event. She was ecstatic about it, discussing the trip's specifics as if it were the greatest thing ever. I felt terrible to my stomach. This was something she had not revealed to me. She had time for a weekend excursion with her pals, but she couldn't remember even the smallest details about me. I tried to dismiss it at first, but the more I considered it, the more betrayed I felt. It wasn't simply that she prioritized her hobbies, she never thought about how I'd feel. She had plenty of time and energy for everything else, but when it came to us, I felt like an afterthought. So I stopped engaging. I stopped making an attempt. I stopped texting her throughout the day and trying to make small chat when she arrived home. I felt if she didn't notice the distance between us, she probably never would. I needed her to see what was going on. I needed her to feel how I was feeling. Eventually, our pals noticed. They were initially all on Sarah's side, claiming that I was overreacting. But eventually, they noticed it as well. Several friends contacted me, stating they understood my unhappiness and even confessed Sarah had been selfish. They told me I deserved better, and I understood I wasn't alone in seeing the reality. But nothing changed. The final blow came when Sarah canceled our scheduled dinner date to attend a last-minute gathering with her pals. She didn't even tell me in person. She sent me an apology, stating she couldn't refuse the invitation. That was it. That was when I understood I needed to make a decision. This was something I couldn't keep putting off. Sarah wouldn't change unless I forced her to. I could wait for her to figure it out, but at what cost? The longer I stayed, the more I felt like I had lost myself. I needed to stop waiting for a relationship that was unsatisfactory. Now I'm at a crossroads. I'm not sure if I have the strength to walk away, but I can't keep continuing like this. The emotional barrier has grown so far that I'm not sure how to bridge it anymore. Something needs to give. It's time for me to make a difficult decision about my marriage, one that will either force her to wake up or allow me the space I require to move on. Update 5. After everything that had happened, I felt it was time to take a step back and consider what I really wanted. I needed to decide if I wanted to keep trying in this relationship or if it was time to walk away for forever. So I chose to spend the entire weekend alone. I did not respond to Sarah's SMS or calls. I didn't even leave the house often. I needed room to think, and this time I wasn't going to allow my emotions influence my decision. During that weekend, I finally realized the reality. I had been settling for less than I deserved for quite some time. I recognized how emotionally spent I had gotten by clinging to something that no longer existed. The small things I did for Sarah, the gestures, the effort, all seemed to go unappreciated. She wasn't making an effort to make me feel respected. She was not even trying. And the worst part? Sarah didn't seem to notice anything wrong. She simply went about her normal routine, figuring everything was great. That understanding ached. I spent the entire weekend reflecting on how much I gave to this relationship and how little I received in return. I was no longer upset about the anniversary or the airport event. I was concerned about the big picture. Sarah had never really cared about putting me first. She had never seen me as a priority. When I came out of my weekend of reflection, I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I was emotionally weary, and if I stayed in this relationship, I would only continue to be harmed. So I arranged one last conversation with Sarah. This was it. I was going to lay it all out and set clear boundaries for what I needed if this relationship was going to survive. I decided to wait until the following weekend to have the chat. Sarah was going to be home, and I knew it was our last chance to actually talk. I was prepared to be direct. To tell her everything I had been keeping hidden for so long. When the time arrived, I sat with Sarah in the living room. She could see something was wrong, but I don't think she expected what happened. I began by telling her that I couldn't continue in a relationship in which I felt underappreciated. I've tried to connect with you, I explained, but nothing has changed. You're always too busy, and I'm constantly making excuses for you. I can't do it anymore. Sarah appeared shocked. She couldn't believe what I was saying. She continued asking, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? I didn't realize things were so horrible." It was as if she was taken aback by anything I said, but I found it difficult to feel sorry for her. How could she not have realized it? How could she not notice the impact her negligence was having on me? She instantly transferred the blame back onto me, saying, "You should have told me how you felt. I didn't realize things were this horrible." I thought everything was fine, she explained. She made it appear as if it was my fault for not being more outspoken about how miserable I was. That's when I realized she was completely out of touch with the state of our relationship. I've tried, Sarah, I answered, trying to remain cool. I've tried to connect with you multiple times, but you never listen. You do not take my problems seriously, and I have been left feeling alone. I can't continue doing this. Sarah did not take it well. She asked me for another opportunity. I will change, I swear. I will put forth more effort. I will prioritize you. Please don't leave me. Her voice was imploring now, and her eyes were filled with desperation. For a brief moment, I considered backing down, but I knew I couldn't just let her keep making bogus promises. She had been doing so for years. I'm willing to give it one last try, I told you. But this time, things have to be different. I need you to actually show me that you can change. No more excuses. No more empty apologies. Sarah agreed, but I was not convinced. Her words were only that, words. Actions spoke louder, and I wanted to see if she would follow through on anything she said. We discussed specific things she could do to make time for us, organize more thoughtful dates, and be present while we were together. It was a modest list, but it was the beginning. The following few days saw a variety of tiny but obvious changes. Sarah began planning dates again. They weren't lavish, but they were thoughtful, and she was obviously trying. She began to be more present at home, taking the time to talk to me rather than disappearing into her phone or watching TV. It felt like a start in the right direction, but a part of me didn't believe it would endure. Several days later, Sarah surprised me with a handwritten note. She apologized for everything, realized how much I had been carrying in the relationship, and stated her commitment to making significant changes. I was shocked. This was the first time she had truly accepted responsibility for her acts, and it meant a lot to me. It was a step forward, but I was still unsure whether it would be sufficient. I began to sense a glimmer of hope, but I maintained my hard boundaries. I wasn't going to let myself slip into the same habits. I needed to see actual, long-lasting progress. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful that things would improve. But I wasn't going to base my happiness only on Sarah. That was how much I had learned. So, for now, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I can control my own happiness. Whatever happens to her, if things go better, that's terrific. But if they don't, I will be prepared to walk away. The decision is now in my hands. My family tried to ruin my wedding. Am I the asshole for organizing a luxury cruise for my birthday and not inviting my parents or siblings? I, a 28-year-old male, work as a medical device development engineer for a large healthcare organization. Honestly, I never expected to find myself in this predicament. For context, I've been leading a groundbreaking initiative to create a new cardiac monitoring system that is transforming how we follow heart problems in real time. The technique we developed has the potential to save thousands of lives by detecting cardiac irregularities hours before a severe incident. Our team's work has been published in numerous leading medical journals, and we just received a renowned industry innovation award. Professionally, my life is flourishing. However, my familial situation is very different. That disparity has never been more clear than today, as I face what is perhaps the most important decision I've ever had to make about my familial relationships. I'm the middle child in a household with 3 siblings. My older brother Alex, 32 million, works as a cardiac surgeon at a famous hospital and is the perfect child. Sophia, 16F, my younger sister, is the baby of the family, and she is always showered with affection. Every year, their birthdays are huge celebrations. For Alex's last birthday, our parents leased out an entire premium restaurant, hosted over 100 guests, and spared no expense. When Sophia turned 16, they hired a live band and turned our backyard into a festival venue. I remember how they spent weeks preparing every detail, from creating custom decor to hiring a professional photographic crew. Let me paint you a picture of how I grew up. Every success I made was overshadowed by those of my siblings. I recall sitting at the dinner table on my 8th birthday, hearing my family talk about Alex's soccer game as if it were any other day. They had thrown him a massive superhero-themed party 2 weeks prior, complete with a magician, special costumes, and party favors that outperformed any item I possessed. The entire neighborhood was there, kids running around in capes and masks, and my parents were beaming with pride at their magnificent firstborn. When I eventually got up the confidence to ask if they had forgotten my birthday, my mother barely looked up from her phone and said, "Oh, sorry, honey, we've been so busy with Alex's tournament schedule and Sophia's dance performance. We will make it up to you next year." She returned to displaying everyone photos from Alex's party on her phone. I recall sitting there, staring at my untouched food and feeling invisible in my own home. They never made it up to me. Not that year or any other year. The pattern persisted throughout my childhood. When I was 13, we were enjoying a family meal when the waitress inquired about any upcoming birthdays. My mother actually chuckled and said, "Oh, just his, but we aren't doing anything major. He's not the type to require much." Everyone at the table giggled, as if it were a light-hearted joke. When I think back to that moment, the shame still burns in my chest. Later following year, they threw Sophia a half-birthday party because she was disappointed that her birthday fell during the summer while school was out. The gap wasn't limited to birthdays. Throughout my childhood, every request I made was answered with excuses, yet my siblings received whatever they want. When I was 10, Alex begged for the most recent game console. Our parents went 3 hours to another city to get it, stating, "Nothing's too much trouble for our future doctor." A few months later, I requested the local store for a scientific kit, which I planned to utilize for the school science fair. My mother disregarded it, stating, "That's too expensive right now." The following week, they purchased Sophia an iPhone simply because she mentioned wanting one in passing. They were not isolated incidents. Every accomplishment in my life was considered as an afterthought. I graduated from high school as valedictorian and was accepted into one of the top engineering institutions in the country. Most parents would be thrilled, right? I scarcely acknowledged it. My father simply responded, "That's nice," while gazing at his phone. My mother's only reply was, "Well, engineering was your backup since you didn't try for medical school like Alex." Alex was accepted to medical school the same month, and they celebrated with a wedding reception-themed party. They hired caterers, live music, and even had special decorations printed with the words, "Future Dr. Alexander" on them. 2 years later, when Sophia graduated from high school with ordinary grades, they hired a professional photographer, made a tribute video, and bought her a brand new automobile as a graduation present. My college graduation gift? A gift card to Best Buy. Now, let me tell you about my present career success, not to brag, but to demonstrate the stark contrast in how my family views accomplishments. For the past 2 years, I've led a team of 15 engineers in the development of a groundbreaking heart monitoring gadget. This is not just another medical device. We're talking about technology that has the potential to dramatically alter our approach to heart attack prevention. The device employs advanced AI algorithms to detect small cardiac problems up to 24 hours before a big incident, allowing clinicians critical time to treat. Our initiative has been highlighted in 3 major medical journals, and we recently received the Healthcare Innovation Award, one of the most distinguished accolades in our field. What's with the irony? Our gadget has the potential to benefit patients like the ones Alex treats, but he has never shown any interest in learning about my work. Throughout the award ceremony, my entire team's families were present, celebrating with champagne and taking proud photos. My parents? They did not even respond to the invitation. Last month, at our weekly family video call, I attempted to inform everyone about the honor. My mom interrupted me mid-sentence to ask Alex about his most recent operation schedule. They then spent 20 minutes admiring Sophia's Instagram images from her recent weekend excursion to the beach. My achievements were not even acknowledged. When I tried to bring it up again, my father simply said, "That's nice, son," before shifting the conversation to Alex's imminent department head nomination. I tried talking to them about this trend several times throughout the years. Each attempt has resulted in dismissal or gaslighting. "You're just too sensitive," my mother would say, rolling her eyes. "We treat all of our children equally," my father mumbled, avoiding eye contact as usual. Alex would smirk and add, "Maybe if you did something actually important," while Sophia would sigh deeply and label me an attention seeker. Despite their negligence, I've managed to have a prosperous life. I have a great career, good friends, and an amazing girlfriend, Stephanie, 27F, who has been really supportive throughout. She has seen personally how my family's treatment impacts me, even if I try to hide it. Last month, at a meal with her family, her mother made a greater production about my birthday than my own family has ever done. She prepared my favorite cake, which she recalled from a casual talk months earlier, and gave me a nice work-related gift. It was moving, but it also made me realize how much I had missed out on. That's what prompted my current decision. My birthday is in 3 weeks, and instead of preparing for another disappointment, I'm taking charge. I've booked a luxury cruise and organized a lavish celebration, not just any cruise. I have reserved a luxury suite package on one of the most prominent cruise lines. The program includes unique dining experiences, spa treatments, and private shore excursions. I'm inviting all of our extended family, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, as well as my close friends. The guest list contains approximately 50 people, all of whom have expressed an interest in my life and achievements over the years. But here's the kicker. I'm intentionally excluding my immediate family. The invitations have already been sent, and I have something special planned for the major celebration dinner. I'm going to show a slideshow, and not just any slideshow. I've accumulated images and memories of all the birthdays they missed, accomplishments they overlooked, and occasions they made me feel invisible. Each image will be accompanied by a related image of how they celebrated Alex or Sophia on similar occasions. Is this petty? Maybe. But it feels necessary. I've also prepared a presentation about our medical gadget project. Not to brag, but to demonstrate what I've accomplished while my family was too preoccupied with Alex's medical career. The gadget has already been licensed for clinical trials, and preliminary findings indicate that it could lower cardiac death rates by up to 30%. This might potentially save thousands of lives. The word spread through the family grapevine, and the emotions have been intense. My Aunt Susan, who has always been more aware of family dynamics, immediately responded yes, and called to say she is proud of me for sticking up for myself. Several cousins have also offered their support, stating that they have noticed how I have been treated over the years but were unsure how to handle it. However, not everyone has been supportive. Some relatives describe me as petty and immature. My mother has been blowing up my phone, leaving voicemails alternating between guilt-tripping, "How could you do this to your mother after all we've sacrificed for you?" and threats. "You'll regret this behavior, young man." My father wrote his normal passive-aggressive text about how I am tearing the family apart and creating unnecessary drama. Alex called me childish and advised me to grow up and accept that some people just achieve more in life. Sophia wrote a cryptic, hostile social media post about attention-seeking behavior and toxic siblings who can't handle others' success. But my friends and Stephanie absolutely support me. My best friend from college, who has seen my family dynamics for years, said something that really resonated. "Sometimes it takes a great act to disrupt destructive patterns. You've attempted to talk to them quietly for years. Maybe they'll finally listen." Stephanie has been especially fantastic throughout this. She's helped me organize every aspect of the cruise, from the meals to the decorations. She reminded me that this isn't about vengeance, it's about finally standing up for myself and refusing to be the forgotten child any longer. Her encouragement has shown me what a good family dynamic should look like. The cruise is booked, invites have been sent, and there is no going back now. Most of the visitors have already said yes, with many expressing enthusiasm for both the event and what it represents. Some relatives are plainly split between wanting to support me and being concerned about the potential for conflict with my parents. Surprisingly, most people are still opting to come. I created a special Instagram hashtag for the event and began posting teases about the approaching celebration. My mother saw these posts, despite being blocked. She created a bogus account and called my aunt in tears, screaming that I was publicly humiliating the family. Everyone understands the hypocrisy of her now caring about family disgrace after years of publicly ignoring me. I understand that this may appear radical to some people. Perhaps it is. But after 28 years of being treated as an afterthought, of seeing my siblings lauded while I am disregarded, of having my accomplishments discounted and my feelings questioned, it seems necessary. This isn't just a birthday celebration anymore. It's about taking control of my story and telling my family that I'm not going to be the invisible middle child any longer. The cruise will set off in 3 weeks. Half of me is delighted to finally celebrate myself properly, but another half is concerned about the consequences. Some friends say I should have broken contact discreetly rather than making a statement, but I believe I needed to do so, not just for me, but for any middle kid who has ever felt ignored. Am I taking things too far? Should I have taken a less dramatic approach to this situation? The cruise is paid for, and the majority of guests have confirmed, but I'm still wondering if I'm burning bridges that I might wish to cross again in the future. I would welcome any suggestions, especially from individuals who have experienced similar familial situations. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the cruise birthday celebration, and I need to tell you what happened because things have escalated beyond my expectations. The cruise itself was amazing. Almost everyone who had RSVP'd turned up, around 45 people in total, including the majority of our extended family and close friends. I presented my slideshow during the first night's welcome dinner in the ship's premium restaurant. The crowd fell silent as photos appeared on the screen. Empty chairs at my childhood birthday dinners juxtaposed with Alex's grandiose festivities. My overlooked academic successes next to Sophia's recognized occasions. What I didn't expect was my Aunt Carol to burst into tears halfway through, claiming she had never realized the enormity of the disparity. Several additional relatives stated that they had seen the unequal treatment but had not realized how systematic it was until they saw it set out chronologically. The presentation on my medical gadget project garnered a resounding response. My uncle Robert, who works in hospital administration, even approached me about deploying our monitoring system at his facility. It's funny how my professional accomplishments suddenly become impressive when validated by others. But this is where things became intense. On the second day of the vacation, my mother convinced the cruise line to let her board at our first port call. She stated she was a surprise visitor invited to the celebration. Security let her through because she had images of me on her phone that proved she was my mother. She stormed into our lunch gathering, mascara flying, yelling about how I was attempting to turn the family against her. "After all we've done for you?" she shouted in front of everyone. "You ungrateful and hateful child." Stephanie attempted to intervene, but my mother turned on her, accusing her of poisoning her son against his family. The big shock came when my normally quiet Aunt Margaret rose up and challenged my mother. "Helen," she continued firmly, "we have all seen you prefer Alex and Sophia for years. We said nothing since we did not want to intervene. But this is over now." Several more relatives joined in, expressing their own views on unfair treatment throughout the years. My mother left in tears, but the drama hadn't ended. That evening, Alex and Sophia carried out a concerted social media onslaught. They shared childhood images with notes criticizing ungrateful siblings and attention-seeking behavior. However, it backfired terribly. People began commenting with their own insights about how I had been handled differently throughout the years. The cruise lasted 3 more days. Then something unexpected happened. Without my immediate family around, I experienced what genuine family support is like. My cousins shared anecdotes about their own experiences with partiality. Uncle James, whom I had always assumed was distant, confessed that he had followed my career via business publications and was truly happy of my accomplishments. When we returned, I saw over 30 missed calls from my parents and a lengthy email from my father. For the first time, he acknowledged the inequality in how they treated us, but in a way that made matters worse. We focused more on Alex because he was following the family medical tradition and on Sophia because she needed extra support. "You were always so independent and capable. We thought you didn't need the attention." The fallout has persisted. Yesterday, my mother arrived at my office, causing a disturbance in the foyer. She requested to meet with me, telling the security guard how I was breaking her heart and destroying our family. My colleagues witnessed the entire incident, and my supervisor later summoned me in to make sure I was okay. Surprisingly, he recounted his own experience breaking free from poisonous family dynamics and expressed his entire support. Stephanie's family has been fantastic throughout this. Her parents asked me over for supper last night and told me they consider me a member of their family. Her father even admitted that he wishes he'd had the fortitude to challenge his own family's partiality when he was young. The most unexpected development came from my younger relatives. Several of them have contacted me to say that seeing me stand up for myself has given them the confidence to handle similar difficulties in their own family relationships. My cousin Jenny even included our narrative into her psychology class presentation on family systems and partiality. Looking ahead, I've resolved to stick to the restrictions I've set. I'm not fully cutting off touch, but I'm no longer willing to be the forgotten child. I've blocked my siblings on social media and created email filters for my parents. My new policy is simple. I will only interact with family members who respect me and acknowledge their previous behavior. Stephanie and I are considering moving in together, possibly to a different city where her employer has an office. The distance may be beneficial, allowing everyone time to process and reflect. Thank you to everyone who has advised me on this problem. The trip may have appeared to be an extreme gesture, but it brought concerns to light that had been festering for decades. Sometimes you need a major moment to break old habits. The next post will most likely come after my parents' next wedding anniversary event, which I have already decided not to attend. Change is difficult, but important. Update 2. It has been 6 months since my last post, and I can't believe I'm writing this, but the situation has worsened much worse. What's the biggest news? Stephanie and I are engaged. What should have been a happy occasion has turned into another family drama. Following the cruise incident, I had little contact with my immediate family, preferring to focus on my relationship with Stephanie. The suggestion came at an ideal time, during a weekend trip to showcase our medical product at a healthcare conference. She's been my rock during all of this family drama. However, things turned ugly during our venue tour last weekend. We were touring our third potential wedding destination, a lovely historic building with a garden ceremony area. Halfway through the trip, I heard my mother's voice echoing down the corridor. They had somehow learned about our venue tour schedule. Later, I realized that my cousin Lauren had unintentionally disclosed it in the family group chat. My parents arrived with Alex and Sophia in tow, like some sort of intervention team. My mother immediately began telling the venue coordinator about her idea for the wedding, completely ignoring Stephanie and me. When I firmly said that they had not been invited and needed to leave, my mother burst into tears in front of the venue personnel and other couples who were visiting the space. What occurred next still seems strange. Alex, the responsible older brother, attempted to pull me away for a family discussion. When I declined, he remarked, "This is what happens when you let the middle child make important decisions." Sophia was shooting everything with her phone, perhaps for a dramatic social media post. The venue planner, bless her heart, quickly recognized the situation and had security escort them out, but not before my mother yelled that she would never forgive this betrayal, and that I was breaking your father's heart all over again. Here's the thing, they didn't just come across us. They had obviously planned this. They brought printed images from my childhood of good family occasions, which they planned to exhibit to the venue workers. My mother even brought her old wedding album and discussed family traditions that we needed to incorporate. After they left, we discovered that they had already visited our other 2 potential wedding locations earlier that week, informing the staff that they were the key decision makers. They even attempted to put down deposits to secure the dates. Stephanie was naturally shaken. Her family was appalled when they learned what had transpired. Her father, who is generally very polite, called my father immediately to inform him that their behavior was unacceptable. This sparked more controversy, with my father accusing Stephanie's family of stealing his son. We have recently chosen to drastically rethink our wedding arrangements. Neither of the venues on our original list will be used. We're now looking at venues outside of our area, and we've engaged a wedding planner who specializes in dealing with delicate family circumstances. She is putting in place stringent security measures and a thorough guest screening process. What's the silver lining to all of this? Our bond has only gotten stronger. Stephanie and I are more confident than ever that we are making the proper decision to begin our lives together away from poisonous family relationships. I've also received unexpected help from my colleagues. My employer, remembering the recent event at our office, has approved additional security measures at work. He has even volunteered to host our wedding on his vacation property if we choose a fully private setting. The difficult element isn't the drama itself. It's recognizing that my wedding day, one of life's most important occasions, is being turned into yet another battleground for my family's turmoil. But this time, I am not backing down. Stephanie and I deserve to spend our day the way we want. We're going forward with our plans, but with increased security and an extremely selective guest list. Our wedding will be a celebration of love and happiness, not just another stage for family drama. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I'd like to explain what happened at our wedding. This will be my final update since, following what happened, I've made a definitive choice about my family relationships. The wedding day began nicely. We found a stunning private estate 3 states away, hired security, and implemented stringent guest screening. Stephanie looked amazing, and our closest friends and selected family were present to support us. The morning preparations went well, and Stephanie's family made everyone feel loved and included. Despite all of our efforts, my mother was able to enter just as the officiant was about to begin the ceremony. The doors flew open, and my mother dashed down the aisle, my father trailing behind her like a reluctant shadow. What came next was bizarre. Instead of the standard "I object" moment, my mother launched a full-fledged show about how ungrateful I was. She had prints of family portraits, which she began handing to stunned guests as a bizarre wedding favor. What truly crossed the line was when she turned to Stephanie and remarked, "Good luck on this one. He's been bitter his entire life." But this is where things changed. Instead of letting this wreck our day, I finally mustered the courage to speak all I'd been holding back. I came up and quietly informed my mother. "This is not about you. It never was. This refers to your incapacity to love your children equally. Today is not about the past. It is about my future with Stephanie." The security team moved to escort my parents out, but my mother had not finished. She turned to the guests and began divulging sensitive family facts, attempting to embarrass me. That's when Stephanie's father intervened. He stepped between my parents and us, with serene power, saying, "You have made your point. Now, leave my children alone." The term "children" had a strong impact. In that moment, I understood I'd discovered what I'd been hunting for all along, a family willing to adore me. After being escorted away, something unexpected occurred. Several guests, even distant cousins who had watched my family's behavior over the years, spoke up to express their observations. My cousin's wife, a family therapist, discreetly informed me that my mother's behavior exhibited classic indicators of narcissistic family dynamics. We proceeded with the ceremony, which was magnificent. Stephanie's brother delivered a heartfelt tribute at the reception. He discussed how family is more than simply DNA, but also about individuals who celebrate your accomplishments and support you during difficult times. The next morning, my father called. For the first time in his life, he admitted their favoritism, but in a way that made everything plain. He responded, "We only pushed Alex and Sophia more since you were so capable on your own. You must understand, it was easy to concentrate on them." That was it. That admission of taking the easiest road rather than being fair parents solidified my decision. I'm done trying to understand or repair this connection. I'm over expecting they'll change or suddenly become the parents I needed. I have officially changed my phone number. Our new house address is not listed. I took a promotion that puts me in charge of our company's West Coast expansion, which means we'll be moving across the nation. Stephanie's employer also has an office there, and her family has already made plans to visit. The medical device initiative continues to save lives. Last week, we received statistics indicating that our technology had avoided over 200 possible cardiac incidents. Alex still works at the same hospital that rejected our device implementation proposal, which is ironic given that it could have helped his patients. Thank you to everyone who has been following my story. Your support gave me the courage to speak up for myself and set boundaries. To anyone dealing with similar family dynamics, you deserve to be honored, you deserve to be seen. Sometimes the family you choose is more significant than the one you were born into. This will be my final update because there is nothing else to say. I'm not angry anymore, I am not hurt, I'm just finished. My new family, Stephanie, her family, our friends, and those who truly care about us, is my primary priority right now. Walking away from a situation is sometimes the healthiest option. It is not about vengeance or punishment. It is about choosing serenity, joy, and surrounding oneself with others who actually appreciate your existence. I saved my dad's company, making it a $150 million empire, while my playboy brother was still favored. He humiliated me and took the CEO role, firing me. This story is titled "My Deadbeat Brother Spent Years Partying While I Turned Dad's Failing Company into a $150 million empire." He fired and humiliated me during the shareholders meeting. I left quietly. Hello everyone. Before we begin, a small favor. If you love this type of work, please subscribe. It's free, helps the channel, and ensures you never miss out on great videos. Okay, let's get started. Hey Reddit, have you ever had one of those moments when you feel like everything in your life is hanging by a thread? That was where I was 10 years ago, staring at a mess I hadn't made but couldn't ignore. Let me backtrack a little. My father created this corporation from nothing. He was good at what he did, but what about money? Not very much. By the time I was 26, just out of business school, the company was losing money. My father looked 10 years older than he was, buried in tension. And what about my older brother Adam? He was not helping. Adam was 31 at the time. While I was working hard to understand supply networks and financial models, he was, let's just say, having a good time. He possessed an effortless charm that made him the favorite. Always have, always will. I knew that. It wasn't new, but it still stings. One night, I found my father sitting in his office, surrounded by mountains of unpaid invoices and contracts that were never going to be fulfilled. He didn't even notice me walking in. His desk looked like a catastrophe zone, and he didn't appear to have slept for weeks. When he finally recognized me, he remarked, "I believe it is over, son. I'm not sure how to fix this." That hit me more than I expected. I'm not sure if it was the weight of his words or the reality that everything he had worked for could crumble, but something inside me clicked. I promised him I will handle it. I'm not sure whether he believed me at the time, but he didn't argue. Honestly, I believe he was relieved that someone was stepping up. Since then, I have almost lived at the office. I understood every detail about how the corporation operated, or, more precisely, how it did not function. I became acquainted with the numbers, renegotiated contracts, and spoke with every client that passed through the door. Many of them did not want to hear from me. I was young and inexperienced, and they had already lost faith in us. I cannot tell you how many times I was told no or had doors shut in my face. But I kept showing up. People noticed that, you know? Even those who didn't like me initially began to take me seriously after a time. The first year was grueling. I was working at least 16 hours a day. My father was still officially in charge, but he delegated the majority of the decision-making authority. I drastically reduced unneeded spending. This includes some of Adam's more extravagant expenses. He had this habit of charging personal expenses to the company account, and no one ever stopped him. I halted it. He did not take it well. I recall him showing up at the office one day just to laugh at me. "Look at you playing CEO," he said. "Don't become too comfy. Dad will not let you take it." I ignored him as always. I knew how the game worked. Adam was the favorite. He was always given credit for things he didn't do, as well as the benefit of the doubt when he made mistakes. But I was not doing this for approval. I was doing it because I didn't want to waste my father's hard work. By the end of the year, things began to improve. We weren't prospering yet, but we also weren't drowning. Slowly, we began to rebuild our reputation. Clients returned, staff came to believe that their jobs were safe, and the company was genuinely profitable. It wasn't much, but it was something. However, success does not solve all problems. My father was proud of our development, but in his opinion, Adam could do no wrong. Adam was always proud of me, no matter what I accomplished. Even though Adam was rarely around, my father would discuss his economic acumen over family dinners. While everyone else was talking about vacations, I was calculating numbers and strategizing for expansion. It was not fair, but life rarely is. I decided early on that I didn't need the credit. If Adam chose to accept all of the acclaim, that was acceptable. I had larger aims in mind. My father's praise would have been good, but what mattered to me was creating the firm something to be proud of, something sustainable, something I could look back on and say, yes, I did that. The company underwent a transformation over the years. We began offering new services, created some unique technological solutions, and moved into markets we never imagined possible. Revenue progressively increased, from scraping by to reaching 8 figures, and then crossing into 9. It was weird to see something that was on the verge of collapse transform into an industry leader. I should have felt great, but there was always this underlying tension. Adam wasn't as absent anymore. As the company grew in success, he began to appear more frequently at the workplace, acting as if he were an essential part of the operation. Everyone knew better, but no one said anything, including Dad. Looking back, I believe that was the first hint that something was wrong. Adam disliked the fact that the spotlight was no longer totally focused on him. He'd joke about how I was too serious or needed a life outside of the job, but there was an edge to his remarks, as if he was preparing for something. I had no idea what it was, but I could feel it. Still, I kept my head down and concentrated on my work. I wasn't going to let his anxieties destroy all I'd worked so hard for. Or so I told myself. In actuality, I didn't believe he could cause much damage. I underestimated him. That was my first error. By the time we reached $150 million in revenue, the fractures were beginning to appear. I just hadn't realized how deep they were. I knew something was wrong the moment Dad called the shareholder meeting. It's not like he hadn't gathered us before, but this time felt different. The phrase he used, a significant announcement about the company's future, had a finality to it. I assumed it was about his retirement. After all, he had been talking about taking a step back for years, particularly after the company had steadied. I was not nervous. If anything, I was prepared. I'd been running the company without a title for years, and this meeting seemed like a formality to make it official. I wasn't seeking for a pat on the back, but I assumed this was a logical step. Who else might take over? Adam arrived late, of course. That was vintage Adam. I was already at the boardroom table, reviewing my notes for the presentation I'd prepared, when he walked in as if nothing mattered. He was always smiling, shaking hands, and cracking jokes. Everyone adored him. That's the issue with Adam. You almost forgot he'd never done anything to deserve the respect he received. He had a knack of making people feel like he belonged, even if he didn't. He threw me a wink as he sat down, which made my stomach turn. Not because I was afraid, Adam had never posed a genuine threat, but because it appeared premeditated. I brushed it off. It makes no sense to let my thoughts go wild before the conference even begins. Dad entered a few minutes later, looking exhausted but resolute. He began his normal spiel about the company's history, how important it was to him, and how proud he was of what we had accomplished. It was a little over the top, but that was Dad's style. He loved to set the tone before breaking the big news. When he finally came to the point, he stood up, fixed his glasses, and said, "It's time for me to pass the torch." He hesitated, gazing around the room, as if expecting for applause or something. After much consideration, I've decided that Adam will be the new CEO. I swear time paused for a second. My brain refused to process what I had just heard. Is Adam the CEO? Surely, this was a mistake. I looked at Adam and he was beaming from ear to ear, not surprised, not taken off guard, just grinning. That's when it struck me. He had known. He had known all along. I didn't have time to think about it because Dad continued going. I believe Adam embodies the leadership qualities this company needs to move forward, he told me. Leadership qualities? The guy who was often late for meetings? The individual whose only contribution to the organization was depleting the entertainment fund for years? Before I could say anything, Adam stood up, clutching a folder. I'd like to take a moment to address something important, he continued, his tone formal, which was amusing coming from him. He opened the folder and began flicking through the pages, making a huge out of it. Over the past few months, he continued, I've come across some troubling discrepancies in the way certain decisions have been made. He looked at me and then at the board members, as if he was trying to judge their reactions. It appears that my brother has been operating outside his authority. I couldn't believe what I heard. He went on to accuse me of conducting unapproved deals, exceeding my authority, and compromising the company's name. He portrayed me as a reckless, power-hungry character who had ran amok while Dad was distracted. It was all very cleverly worded, just vague enough to sound reasonable without providing any actual evidence. I opened my lips to defend myself, but Dad interrupted me. Let him finish, he responded, his tone calm but forceful. Adam concluded his brief presentation by saying, I only bring this up because I care deeply about the company's future, and I want to ensure we maintain the highest level of integrity. Integrity, coming from Adam? The irony was almost too much to bear. When he was finished, the room fell silence. All eyes were on Dad, who took a big breath and announced, After reviewing the situation, I've decided to terminate Marcus's employment, effective immediately. And my world came crumbling down. Security guards emerged out of nowhere, standing by the entrance, seemingly waiting for the signal to haul me out. I did not fight it. I did not even say anything. What was there to say? The decision had been decided long before the meeting, and I had fallen right into their trap. As I was gathering my belongings, Adam leaned over and muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, nothing personal, little brother. Just business. That was when I realized it wasn't all about the corporation. This was about him demonstrating something to me, Dad, and anybody who had ever compared us. He wasn't concerned about the company's future, he was concerned about taking it from me. I walked out of that boardroom with all the decorum I could summon, but inside I was seething. Not only was I caught off guard, but Adam had used years of hard effort against me. He had not only taken the job, but also the narrative. By the time I arrived to my car, my phone was already flooded with texts from coworkers, friends, and even a few board members who were taken aback by what had occurred. I disregarded them all. I needed to think. The drive home was a haze. I continued repeating the encounter in my thoughts, trying to figure out why I had missed the signs. Looking back, they were all there. Adam coming up at the workplace more frequently, Dad being abnormally secretive, and even some of the board members behaving distant recently. I'd been so preoccupied with operating the company that I hadn't noticed the storm developing right under my nose. When I arrived home, I sat in the dark for hours, trying to make sense of everything. How could Dad, the guy who had seen me devote my life to this enterprise, chose Adam? Was it loyalty? Blind favoritism? Or was I just so replaceable in his eyes? Whatever the cause, one thing was certain. I was out and Adam was in. But here's the thing about Adam. He's terrific at portraying the character, but he's lousy at recognizing the stakes. While he was busy celebrating his victory, he didn't realize I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Far from it. I had spent years establishing more than simply a business, I had created leverage. And while they were busy scheming my ruin, they didn't bother to investigate how deep my roots were. That night, I reached a choice. I was not going to fight Adam directly. That's what he expected and wanted, a chance to portray me as bitter and spiteful. No, I planned to do something much smarter. I was going to wait. And when the time came, I was going to remind them all of who started this empire in the first place. The first thing I did was contact a few important employees who had been with the company through thick and thin. These were not spectacular, high-profile individuals. Rather, they served as the company's backbone. The IT staff, a few senior developers, and 2 managers who had worked with me during those difficult early years. I knew they'd answer my phone because, unlike Adam, I'd taken the effort to establish relationships. I didn't tell them everything, I didn't have to. All I said was that there was a lot going on behind the scenes, and if they trusted me, they should wait a few days before making any major choices. Nobody asked questions or hesitated. That was all I needed to know about their loyalty. Next, I focused on the infrastructure. The advantage of rebuilding a company from the ground up is that you know where every piece fits. Over time, I surreptitiously established a separate business to manage our most precious assets, including intellectual property, customer contracts, and proprietary software. On paper, it was simply a support firm designed to streamline operations. In truth, it was the center of the business, and I owned it entirely. Why hadn't I informed anyone about it? Because I knew something like this was going to happen eventually. Maybe not exactly this, but I had a feeling Adam would try to play some form of power play. What about Dad? Let's just say I gave up expecting him to have my back a long time ago. With everything in place, I spent the remainder of the weekend getting receipts, metaphorically speaking. I sifted through years of documents, emails, contracts, and bank records, gathering evidence of Adam's neglect, mismanagement, and blatant dodgy activity. Some of it was minor issues, such as excessive expenditure and missed deadlines. Other issues were more serious. Side dealings with competitors, questionable transactions, and moves that jeopardized the company's future. By Sunday night, I had a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. But that wasn't the endgame. My intention was not to completely ruin Adam. That would have been too simple, and it would have accomplished nothing. My goal was to remind everyone, Adam, Dad, and the board, why I was the one who had originally turned the firm around. On Monday morning, I awoke earlier than usual. Not because I had anywhere to go, but because I wanted to witness the aftermath in real time. I brewed coffee, put up my laptop in my home office, and connected to the company's internal network. Yes, I still had access. You'd think a guy like Adam, with all his leadership abilities, would have thought to withdraw my credentials right away. But no. The first thing I did was activate the failsafe I had programmed into the system years ago. There were no viruses or other dangerous software involved. It was merely a small script that transferred all internal communications to a secure server under my control. Emails, memos, meeting invitations, it all went through me. Then I focused my attention on Adam's PC. Again, no hacking was necessary. He hadn't even changed his password. It was the same one he'd used since college. I uploaded a video file to his desktop and set it to play automatically when he checked in. What about the video? A highlight reel of his worst decisions, replete with timestamps and accompanying documentation. It wasn't spectacular or too dramatic, it was simply a cold, stark reminder of his inadequacy. By 8:15 a.m., the commotion had started. Adam walked into the office, looking smug as ever, and I observed him through the security feed. He sat down at the CEO's desk, turned on his computer, and leaned back in his chair, as if he owned the place. A second later, the video began playing. At first, he appeared bewildered. Then his face flushed red. He banged the keyboard a few times in an attempt to close the file, but it remained open. Every screen in his office showed the same film in repeat. Meanwhile, the notifications began. Board members, department heads, and major investors' inboxes began to fill up one by one with emails. Each email comprised a piece of evidence I had gathered, along with a brief description of how Adam's actions had harmed the organization. I kept the tone professional, no accusations, just facts. Down in the lobby, federal agents entered. I had informed the authorities about some of Adam's more questionable financial practices, and they were ready to speak with him. What about the cherry on top? An email from the IT department notifying the resignation. They had all signed contracts with my subsidiary and were no longer employed by the corporation. The email concluded with a simple statement. We stand with the person who built this company. I saw Adam try to hold it together. He phoned IT support, but no one answered. He called Dad, but his phone went directly to voicemail. He even tried calling me at one point, but I didn't answer. By mid-morning, the board had called an emergency meeting. Adam was summoned, and from what I saw on the security stream, it was not a friendly conversation. I didn't need to hear what was said in that room to know how things ended. By noon, Adam had been let out of the building. I didn't feel smug or vindicated as I watched the events unfold. If anything, I felt relaxed. This was not about vengeance, it was about balance. Adam had spent years relying on charm and manipulation, but when it came down to it, he couldn't keep it up. What about Dad? Well, he had made his decision? I wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was certain, the game had changed. And for the first time in a long time, I had complete control of the situation. The news quickly spread. Employees were muttering by the afternoon about federal authorities arriving, Adam leaving, and the CEO being hauled out of the premises. In the age of immediate communication, this type of turmoil cannot be restrained. By the next morning, rumors had turned into headlines. Company scandal rocks leadership team. There were no names yet, but everyone understood who they were talking about. The stock price plummeted. It wasn't a steady drop, it was a free fall. Investors began withdrawing as soon as they discovered the company's fundamental assets were no longer in its hands. That was intentional, of course. The subsidiary I'd established to house it all had been legally autonomous for years, and it was now the foundation of my new business. Adam inherited a bright, empty shell. Meanwhile, I kept my head down. I wasn't about to show up in the middle of this and look like the man who rubbed salt in the wound. I'd already done enough to disrupt Adam's alleged authority. The following step was not about myself, but about the individuals who truly made the company operate. That morning, I wrote an email to every employee. It was short and to the point. Subject: a new opportunity to the present staff. You have witnessed the happenings of the previous day. Many of you are probably concerned about your future. I want you to know that your efforts and dedication have not gone unappreciated. I'm inviting you to join a new organization where your contributions will be respected, your jobs will be secure, and you'll be working with leaders that value innovation and honesty. Your jobs and benefits will remain unchanged, with more support and possibilities for advancement. If you're interested, you may learn more here. Link. There is no pressure. This is totally your decision. Thank you for what you have done. You deserve better, and I hope I can deliver it. Marcus. By the end of the day, my inbox was swamped with responses. People weren't simply signing on. They were thanking me for giving them an out. It was surreal to hear notes from people who had persevered with the company through its worst days, telling me they believed in me, not the organization that had just collapsed. Over 93% of the employees accepted the offer within hours. Adam, on the other hand, was not doing so well. By midweek, the probe into his financial actions had become public. That's when the true dirt came out. It was discovered that he had been siphoning money via forged vendor contracts. He'd also been collaborating with competitors, selling client information in exchange for under-the-table money. I was aware of some of it, but seeing it all laid out in black and white was overwhelming. The officials acted promptly. Adam was legally charged with fraud, embezzlement, and a variety of other charges. He was released on bail, but his reputation was ruined. The media had a field day, portraying him as the poster child for nepotism gone bad. Every element of his antics, the parties, the reckless spending, and the backroom deals, was brought to light. And then there was Dad. He went radio silent for the first few days, most likely trying to digest what had just transpired. I can only imagine how he felt when he realized that the son he had trusted and favored for decades had turned out to be a massive liability. The board was not spared either. The investors who remained sought answers, and the remaining members scrambled to minimize the damage. But what could they say? The company's basis has been pulled out from underneath them. Everything that made the business valuable was now integrated into my new operation. That week, I met with the leadership team of my new employer. These were the individuals who had followed me out of the chaos. The IT director, the head of operations, a few important managers, and the core development team. We sat around a conference table in the new office space I had secretly reserved months before. It wasn't spectacular, just an efficient modern setup with plenty of room to expand. The first order of business, I continued, is to ensure that everyone feels stable here. No shocks or gimmicks, we've all gone through enough of that. Everyone nodded around the table. I could see relief on their expressions. For years, they had been caught in the crossfire of poor judgment and partiality. They could now focus on their task without worrying about what Adam would do next. The change was not without its challenges. As expected, there were legal challenges, and a few clients required additional reassurance that this was the appropriate decision. But, altogether, things went more smoothly than I had expected. By the end of the month, we were completely operational, and I could finally breathe a bit easier. Meanwhile, the original corporation continued its decline. With no assets, no leadership, and no clear path forward, it became a cautionary tale in the corporate world. The stock price had been artificially inflated by years of hype and was now worth pennies. Investors left, litigation piled up, and the remaining staff struggled to find new positions. Adam, obviously, attempted to spin the story in his favor. He spoke to a local newspaper, stating he had been set up and that the probe was politically motivated. It did not land. By that point, the evidence against him was overwhelming, and even his father refused to defend him publicly. In this scenario, justice was not about destroying Adam, but about holding him accountable. For far too long, he had left it to others to clean up his messes. This time, there was no one left to save him. When the dust settled, the message was clear. Leadership isn't about titles or favoritism. It's about doing the work, winning trust, and accepting responsibility. Adam had failed at all three, and he was now reaping the consequences. I wasn't out for retribution or gloating. I was determined to create something new, free of the faults of the past. The aftermath had been chaotic, but it was also vital. Sometimes the only way to mend something damaged is to dismantle it and start afresh. A week after Adam's public humiliation, I received the call I was expecting. It wasn't from Adam, but from Dad. He'd been keeping his distance ever since things went wrong, but I knew it was only a matter of time before he reached out. He left a short and direct message on my phone. "We need to talk. Your mother and I are going to see you tomorrow." I did not respond. What was there to say? I understood exactly why he was calling. It wasn't an apology, and it certainly wasn't an admission that he had made a mistake. No, this was about the fallout. The tanking stock price, the litigation, the investors bailing out, and the fact that his entire retirement fund was now invested in a company that was on the verge of failure. The next morning, Dad and Mom arrived at my new company's office on time. I had purposefully kept the place low-key, but I was not trying to hide. They discovered me easy enough. When they walked in, I realized how much they had aged in such a short period of time. Dad looked like he hadn't slept in days, and Mom appeared to have been sobbing a lot. They both sat across from me in the small conference room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Dad was the first to speak. "Marcus," he said, his voice straining, "you've made your point, but we need to figure out how to fix this." I sat back in my chair and crossed my arms. "What exactly do you want fixed?" I asked. "What a mess Adam made? The company you allowed him to destroy? Or the reality that your retirement savings are worthless?" Mom flinched, and Dad's expression stiffened. "This isn't the time for blame," he added, trying to remain calm. "We are family. We need to get together and figure this out." I nearly laughed. Now he wants to discuss family? After years of allowing Adam to walk all over me? After firing me in the most humiliating manner possible? Now he was interested in unity? "You don't get to play the family card now, Dad," I responded calmly. "You made it pretty clear where your loyalty lies." He sighed deeply and ran a palm over his face. "I didn't know what Adam was doing," he told me. "Didn't you?" I shot back. "You may not have known the specifics, but you knew he was unqualified. You knew he was overspending. You knew he didn't show up half the time. And you let him take control anyhow." Mom began to speak, but I held up a hand to silence her. "Don't," I replied, shaking my head. "You're not allowed to defend him either. You both made the bed. Now you want me to clean up?" There was a prolonged hush. Finally, Dad stated, "Your mother and I are in a difficult situation. Everything we have saved is related to their firm. If we don't work something out, we may lose the house." And there it was. The real reason for their visit. It was not about Adam or the company. It was about money. I took a deep breath and leaned forward on the table. "I'm going to help you," I said. Relief flooded across their cheeks, but I wasn't finished. "This is how it's going to work," I explained. "I will acquire your company shares at their original value. That will allow you to keep your home and retire comfortably. However, there are some conditions." Dad frowned. "What type of conditions?" "First," I said, "you both sign a non-disclosure agreement. That means no telling anyone, friends, relatives, or reporters, what happened to Adam or the company. Second, you retire peacefully. No more tinkering or attempting to mend things. Third, the money is not free of conditions. You will receive a monthly allowance, and any big expenses must be approved by a trustee." Mom seemed to want to object, but Dad grabbed her arm. "That seems extreme," he responded cautiously. "Extreme?" I repeated, reclining back in my seat. "Dad, I'm being generous. I do not owe you anything. After everything that had happened, I could have gone away and left you to deal with the mess you created. But I am not doing this for you. I'm doing it because deep down, I still care about this family, even though you don't deserve it." That final line impacted more than I expected. I thought Dad was going to protest, but he just nodded slowly. "Fine," he said. "We'll sign whatever you need us to sign." Mom glanced at him with wide eyes. "Leonard?" "It's the best we're going to get," he interrupted her. I stood up, signaling that the meeting had ended. "I'll have the paperwork ready before tomorrow. Once you sign, the cash will be transferred within 48 hours. They also stood, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. This was the man who had always urged me to accept responsibility, admit my faults, and strive for improvement. And here he was, crushed and defeated, pleading for a bailout from the son he'd neglected for years. As they went, Dad looked back and said, "You're a better man than I gave you credit for." I did not respond. Words no longer meant much to me, especially when they came from him. When the door closed behind them, I sat back down and stared at the table for quite some time. This was hardly the victory I had expected. It did not feel like a victory at all. But it was required. Sometimes doing the right thing does not feel pleasant. It simply feels like a satisfactory conclusion. I didn't feel relieved or satisfied the day my parents signed the papers. Instead, I felt a peculiar sense of emptiness. It was finished. They had accepted the terms, and the money was on its way to them. I knew that was the correct thing to do, but it didn't seem like a victory. If anything, it seemed like I was finally bringing an end to something that had been broken for years. But life does not allow for introspection. While my parents adjusted to their new financial reality, I had a firm to run, one that, for the first time, was fully mine. The transfer from the old company to my new venture went more smoothly than I had anticipated. Most of the personnel came over willingly, and the important clients stayed with us. It wasn't only about loyalty. They recognized the value of the relationships and mechanisms we'd established. If anything, the tumult surrounding Adam's demise had strengthened their faith in me. They realized who the true driving force behind the organization had been all along. One of the most significant adjustments I implemented was how we worked as a corporation. I had learned a lot from my blunders in the past, particularly regarding honesty and communication. Under the previous regime, decisions were frequently taken behind closed doors, leaving people rushing to adjust without a clear explanation. I wanted to do things differently. We began holding weekly all-hands meetings where I lay out everything: progress, challenges, and impending goals. No fluff, no business jargon, just plain talk about where we were and where we were going. The first few meetings were slightly awkward. People were unaccustomed to that kind of candor, and I could see some of them were waiting for the other shoe to drop. But, over time, they began to relax. They began to trust me when I claimed we were in this together. One of the most pleasant moments occurred around a month in, when one of the senior devs approached me after a meeting. He'd been with the company for years, one of the silent workhorses who got the job done without making a fuss. "Marcus," he began. "I just wanted to thank you. I've been here a long time, and this is the first time I've felt that someone is truly concerned about what we're doing." It took me off guard. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded and said, "That means a lot. Thank you for staying with us." Those brief moments reminded me why I was doing this. It was not about proving something to Adam, Dad, or anyone else. It was about creating something meaningful, something people would be happy to be a part of. By the conclusion of the first quarter, we had achieved not just stability but also growth. Revenue was increasing, client retention was at an all-time high, and we had even begun bringing in new business. The team was electrified, and the workplace was alive with a level of excitement I hadn't seen in years. One day, as I walked through the workplace, I overheard two employees conversing by the coffee machine. They didn't notice me, so I didn't interrupt. "Honestly," one of them admitted, "this is the finest thing that could have occurred. The previous company was a complete mess. I feel like we have a future here." The other person nodded. "Yes, Marcus gets it. He is not just sitting in his office barking instructions, he is genuinely developing something with us." Hearing that was more satisfying than receiving any award or accolade. It wasn't simply the numbers or the growth that mattered, it was the fact that people believed in our mission. Meanwhile, the old corporation was just scraping by. The lawsuits were stacking up, the stock was basically worthless, and the remaining employees were leaving as quickly as they could. Adam, from what I heard, was attempting to avoid the spotlight, but the harm to his reputation had already been done. He was no longer a name people wanted to associate with. By 6 months, the new company had established itself as the industry leader. We were not only surviving, we were innovating. We developed a new product line that improved logistics for small firms, and it grew faster than we expected. It felt like everything I'd been working on for the previous 10 years was finally coming together. For years, I'd fought to prove myself, to Dad, Adam, and everybody else who had ever doubted me. But in that moment I knew I didn't have to prove anything anymore. I had created something real, something that would last. And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. It's been 3 years since everything went down. If I'm being honest, I still think about it now and then, not in a bad way, but in a way that makes me wonder how I survived it all. Despite the fact that it drastically altered my life, the entire incident feels like a distant memory. My new company, ours, is booming. When I say thriving, I mean we've achieved every goal I ever imagined imaginable. The team we formed after leaving the previous organization has evolved into something I am very proud of. We are not only lucrative, but also respected. People in the industry regard us as the gold standard, the type of organization that others strive to replicate. That feels good, not because of the recognition, but because it confirms that we are doing things correctly. But let us be honest, prosperity does not erase the past. Every now and then, I find myself going through old emails or looking at news headlines about the consequences. Adam's name crops up on occasion, usually as part of a cautionary story about leadership or nepotism. Last I heard, he was working at a low-level job to avoid detection. I don't maintain tabs on him, but it's difficult not to hear things when your name and his are still vaguely related in some circles. My folks have settled into a tranquil retirement. Mom occasionally sends me emails with updates on their new activities or the neighborhood potlucks they have started hosting. Dad, however, has been mute. I haven't communicated with him since the day he signed the papers in my office. I don't think he's bitter, but I also don't think he understands how to rebuild the bridge he burnt. And frankly, I'm not sure I'd let him try. It's funny how much perspective time provides you. When everything first started, I was so intent on proving myself, showing everyone that I was the one who deserved to lead. But 3 years later, I realize I don't care about it anymore. People who know and work with me already understand the type of person I am. I don't need to shout my triumphs from the rooftops, and I certainly don't need confirmation from those who question me. For those who are wondering how the quiet one came out on top, let me explain. While others were busy posturing and playing politics, I was doing the work. While they were making noise, I was planning. Because, at the end of the day, being the loudest or flashiest is not what defines success. It's about strategy, resilience, and recognizing what you're capable of, even when no one else does. The peacocks may attract attention, but what about the eagles? We are the ones who observe things from above. And that's the end of the story, or the beginning, depending on your perspective. Thank you for sticking around. Please let me know if you have any questions, thoughts, or tales to offer. I was a shadow to my sister's piano career, exploited as my family's ATM. They even used my money for her secret engagement party. I, 35F, am a senior investment analyst for a major Manhattan firm, yet to my family, I am nothing more than a personal ATM. I've been hesitant to tell this tale, but recent developments have compelled me to seek outside viewpoints on a subject that has dominated my life for years. Growing up, our entire family revolved on my younger sister, 31F. She was a piano prodigy who began performing at the age of 4. My earliest memories are of helping Mom, 62 degrees Fahrenheit, and Dad, 65 degrees Fahrenheit, prepare for her recitals, ensuring that everything was just right for their little star. While other kids were learning to ride bikes or going on playdates, I was learning how to iron performance costumes and organize sheet music. Make sure your sister has everything she needs for practice, Mom would say, barely looking up from her phone as she recorded another video of my sister's performance. Don't forget to cook dinner. We'll be late tonight due to her master's class. By the age of 11, I was effectively controlling the home. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, it all fell on me. Because your sister needs to focus on her music, was the incessant refrain. I recall the day I won the state mathematics competition in 8th grade. I went home, clutching my award, only to find Mom furiously preparing for my sister's performance. "That's nice, honey," she commented distractedly. "But could you please assist your sister practice? She needs to perfect this piece for the Carnegie Hall Youth Showcase next month." The trophy wound up in a box in my closet, alongside other forgotten accomplishments. The tendency persisted throughout high school. While my sister traveled for competitions and master lessons, I stayed at home and maintained flawless marks. My parents paid thousands of dollars for my sister's private lessons, special music camps, and custom-made performance apparel. Meanwhile, I had to fight for essential school materials. "We need to be practical," Dad would say. "Your sister's career development requires all of our resources." I was not permitted to participate in any after-school events since someone needed to be present at home to prepare for my sister's nighttime practice sessions. When I indicated an interest in joining the debate team, Mom looked at me as if I had suggested we burn down the home. "How could you be so selfish?" she asked. "Your sister needs a peaceful, encouraging atmosphere to practice. You understand how crucial this is to her future." Every family gathering became a recital. Relatives would gather around the piano, gushing about my sister's skill as I served refreshments and cleaned up afterwards. "Such a helpful girl," they'd say patronizingly before turning back to compliment my sister. I learned to be invisible, moving softly through our house like a ghost, ensuring that everything ran properly while drawing no notice to myself. My parents only truly noticed me when anything went wrong with my sister's routine. Then I became visible, but just as a target for blame. If she had a poor performance, it was because I had not provided a calm setting for her practicing. If she felt fatigued during a competition, it was because I hadn't properly prepared her meals. During my senior year of high school, I was admitted into several top universities on partial scholarships. When I showed my parents the acceptance letters, their reaction was lukewarm, at best. "We can't help with any expenses," Dad stated firmly during supper. "Your sister's career development needs all our resources. Besides, you're good with household management, maybe you should look into becoming a housekeeper." That's when our neighbors, the Wilsons, intervened. They had seen me grow up and how I helped at their little accounting office after school while waiting for my sister's practices to finish. Mrs. Wilson, 55 degrees Fahrenheit at the time, had always regarded me as a second daughter, taking an interest in my accomplishments and promoting my academic endeavors. They promised to help with my education fees by establishing up a work-study program at their company. My parents didn't complain, they appeared happy to have me taken care of, so they could concentrate only on my sister. When I attempted to talk about my college plans, Mom cut me off. "We trust the Wilsons to handle it," she added, immediately returning to her phone and organizing my sister's next appearances. "Just make sure this doesn't interfere with your responsibilities at home." The Wilsons became my lifeline. Their encouragement extended beyond financial aid. They demonstrated what it meant to be respected for my own qualities and accomplishments. Mrs. Wilson attended my college orientation when my parents were unable to come due to my sister's summer music festival. Mr. Wilson, 57 million at the time, educated me on financial management and sparked my interest in investment research. Looking back, I understand the Wilsons saw something my parents didn't. A young woman with promise beyond being someone's support network. They supported my education not because they had to, but because they believed in me. Their advice helped me get internships, which led to my current career as a senior investment analyst. Throughout college, I had little touch with my family, only traveling home for important holidays. Each visit followed the same pattern. My sister conducting court in the living room while I assisted in the kitchen, listening to relatives praise her most recent accomplishments. My own accomplishments, Dean's List accolades, internships at famous firms, job offers, were largely overlooked. Everything changed 10 years ago, at what was supposed to be my sister's breakthrough moment. She was preparing for the prestigious Chicago International Piano Competition, which my parents were confident would propel her career to new heights. They'd spent months working out every element, from her performance pieces to her stage demeanor. Even her food was methodically planned to keep her in top-performing condition. The injury occurred during an especially intensive practice session. She was working on Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, a notoriously difficult piece that she persisted on performing despite her teacher's objections. I was at work when Mom called me, her voice quivering with hysteria. "Get to Northwestern Memorial ASAP. Your sister, her wrist, you must come right soon." I discovered them in the ER. Mom screaming violently, Dad pacing like a caged animal, and my sister pale and mute, cradling her right wrist. The diagnosis was devastating. Significant tendon injury with potential nerve involvement. The doctor's words sounded like hammers in the sterile hospital room. Significant rehabilitation is required. Prognosis is unknown. Professional performance might no longer be possible. The next few months were a blur of specialists, second opinions, and increasingly frantic attempts at treatment. My parents liquidated everything they could, including Dad's prized vintage Mustang collection, Mom's family antiques, and even their retirement savings. They flew in European specialists, attempted experimental treatments, and sought advice from alternative medicine practitioners, anything that gave them hope. I watched their finances vanish as they sought miraculous treatments. When their financial advisor suggested bankruptcy protection, they looked at him as if he had suggested abandoning their child. "Money is just money," Dad said. "Our daughter's talent is priceless." I saw he said daughter, as he normally does. Reality set in gradually, like a slow-moving storm. Despite multiple treatments, my sister's wrist never recovered the strength and flexibility required for professional performance. The physicians eventually verified our fears. Her career as a concert pianist was ended. It was more than simply the loss of a profession. It was the dissolution of our entire family mythos. My parents became older in just a few months. Mom stopped fixing her hair and cosmetics, and spent days in her bathrobe viewing footage of my sister's previous performances. Dad, who had always been the family's rock, began missing appointments, bills, and even food. Sometimes they appeared lost, as if their identities were inextricably linked to my sister's musical career. That's when their focus moved to me. But not in the way I had secretly wanted for all those years. They regarded me not as their daughter who could help them recover, but as a financial answer to their escalating issues. I had recently gotten a huge promotion at my firm, becoming a senior analyst before the age of 30, an accomplishment that would have gone unnoticed if it hadn't come with a substantial income rise. "You're doing so well," Mom said on one of her first calls to me in months. Her prideful tone was swiftly followed by, "Your sister needs help with her medical bills. Since you're in such a good position now?" The request was wrapped in layers of remorse and obligation, given with the skillful manipulation that only a mother can perform. At first, I agreed to make a modest monthly donation of $1,000 to help with my sister's therapy and living expenses. It appeared sensible, even necessary. They were family, after all, and I was finally able to give back. The thankfulness looked sincere at first. Mom phoned me on a regular basis to check on my sister's progress, while Dad wrote awkward but emotional thank you emails. But the requests kept coming, each one bigger than the last, with increasingly convoluted excuses. My sister wanted a new automobile because public transportation made her anxious following the incident. My sister's recuperation was hampered by negative energy in the house, which required repair. They required a family vacation because emotional healing is just as important as physical therapy. Then came the credit cards. Just for emergencies, they said, and I was added as an authorized user to their accounts. Their concept of an emergency was surprisingly fluid. Shopping became retail therapy. Costly restaurants were necessary for maintaining family bonds during a crisis, and luxury spa retreats were considered essential for recovery. Monthly expenses rose like ivy on a wall, gradually at first, then abruptly overpowering. $1,000 became $2,000, and finally $3,000. Each increment was followed by detailed explanations and emotional manipulation. "After everything we've done for you," became their regular refrain, though I couldn't recall exactly what they'd done. When I hesitated over a particularly substantial request, Mom reminded me of all the sacrifices they'd made, conveniently forgetting that those sacrifices were solely for my sister. My buddy Rachel, 35F, whom I've known since college, was watching the situation with growing concern. "They're not treating you like family," she explained during our weekly dinner at her parents' restaurant. "They're treating you like an ATM with legs." I dismissed her concerns at first, making excuses about family commitments and filial duty. But her comments stayed with me like burrs. The Wilsons, my long-standing mentors, were also concerned. Mrs. Wilson took me aside after our monthly lunch meeting. "Honey," she began, her face wrinkled with concern. "This is not support, it is exploitation. We didn't help you advance your job so you could become your family's personal banker." The breaking point came last week, when I realized they had spent more than $122,000 on my sister's therapeutic shopping spree, without telling me. The expenses included designer clothes, spa treatments, and a weekend at a luxury resort, all explained as necessary for her emotional recovery. When I tried to talk about setting boundaries, Mom fell into tears and gave an Oscar-worthy act about how I was abandoning the family in our time of need. Later that night, Dad called. His voice was gruff and disapproving, using the same authoritarian tone that had kept me in line throughout my youth. "Your sister requires our assistance more than ever," he admonished. "How can you be so selfish when she's still trying to find her way? We've raised you better than this." The irony of his words, "we raised you," hit me like a physical blow. Did they raise me, or did I raise myself under the influence of their obsession with my sister? Yesterday, I received another credit card statement for $115,000 for a health retreat that I never approved. When I called to inquire, my sister answered the phone. "You make so much money," she added dismissively, with the same arrogant tone I remembered from childhood. "Stop being stingy. You know Mom and Dad need this to deal with everything they've been through because of me." I'm writing from my office on the 47th level of our Manhattan building, surrounded by the trappings of my success, despite, rather than because of, my family's support. The chart on my second monitor depicts my family's financial abuse in cold, hard statistics. Over the last year, they've spent more than $150,000 of my money, which is more than most families' annual income. My financial consultant is concerned about the implications for my long-term financial security. My therapist gently indicates that it is important to set hard boundaries. Rachel alternates between providing her guest room and volunteering to tell my family where they can go, in many languages, thanks to her worldwide business experience. But every time I consider cutting them off, I remember the little girl who simply wanted her parents to appreciate her accomplishments. The adolescent who believed that if she worked hard enough, someone would eventually recognize her as more than a support system. The young woman who still hopes that her family would see her as more than a resource. I'm currently at a crossroads, confronting decisions I never intended to make. The Wilsons, who have been more like parents to me than my own, advise I should protect myself. Rachel provides practical assistance and a secure place to ponder. My therapist discusses boundaries and self-respect, words that appear easy but bear the weight of decades of familial relationships. I'm having trouble with questions that don't seem to have any correct answers. Am I being ruthless by considering financial constraints? Is it immoral to want appreciation for my own achievements? Should I simply accept that this is my job in the family, the dependable one, the responsible one, the human ATM? I really don't know anymore. Update 1. My world imploded yesterday when I found on Instagram that my parents are presently in Hawaii, not for a vacation, but for my sister's secret engagement party, which they paid for with my credit card. During lunch, I was aimlessly scrolling through my feed when I came across a post from a mutual acquaintance that stopped me cold. Paradise with the future wife. What's Josh, engagement bliss to Hawaii. There she was, beaming on a beautiful beach, standing next to her boyfriend, now fiancé, with our parents and his family in the background. They had been there for 3 days. I went 3 days without hearing a word from you. Confused and hurt, I opened my banking app. The charges struck me like fists. First-class flights to Honolulu cost $24,800. Grand WEA Resort, 3 ocean view suites for $21,600. Additional expenses include a welcome meal, spa treatments, a sailing excursion, and a private beachside dinner for $12,000. My hands shook as I dialed Mom's number. When she responded, I could hear Hawaiian music and laughter in the background. "Oh honey," she explained casually, "your father and I just decided to take a short break. You're aware of how tough things have been lately? A short break at the Grand WEA with my sister's fiancé's complete family. That kind of break cost more than $58,000 on my credit card." Silence. Muffled voices. Then my sister got on the phone, her remarks oozing with entitlement. "Listen, Miss Executive," she snarled. "You are not required here. You are no longer family, but rather a walking ATM. Nobody wants to hear about your valuable career as we celebrate my engagement." I urged myself to be calm. "That ATM just paid nearly $60,000 for your little party." She laughed coldly. "That's what you're good at, isn't it? Keep doing your fancy job, and we'll enjoy spending your money. It's the only thing you're helpful for." Always was. The call went dead. Within minutes, they had blocked me on all platforms. Mom sent a final message that read, "We're all tired of your negative attitude and jealousy. Please leave us alone. You've spoiled enough precious moments for your sister." Something cold and hard solidified in my chest. My hands remained steady when I accessed my banking app. Each click felt like it broke another link in the chain that had connected me to their torture. Click. Hotel reservations are canceled. Click. Spa packages and excursions are canceled. Click. Return flight tickets have been canceled. Click. Mom's card is permanently deactivated. The aftermath was immediate. My phone burst with calls and messages. "Mom. It's an emergency. Call immediately. Dad says. Fix this quickly. You are embarrassing the family. Sister. You better get this right. Number. Hawaii. The future in-laws, without a doubt." As the hours passed, their tone changed. Mom said, "Sweetie, please, we can talk." Father. "We'll pay you back." Sister. "Stop being so petty, it is my engagement." Then my sister sent out a social media blast. "I can't believe my own sister would spoil the best time of my life. She has always been envious, but this is a new low." Toxic family. Heartbroken. I'd been quiet long enough. I shared everything, screenshots, credit card statements, and messages. The truth about their hidden celebration, unapproved charges, and nasty statements. The tide shifted immediately. People rallied in support as they realized the truth behind their carefully prepared narrative. Mutual friends informed me of the consequences of my acts. My parents needed to borrow money merely to purchase economy flights home. They had to check out of the Grand WEA in front of other visitors. My sister had a temper tantrum in the lobby, which ended up on TikTok. The actual explosion occurred when the fiancé's family discovered they had been caught up in my family's web of deception. They'd been promised a fully compensated luxury holiday, only to find out they were part of a plot to exploit the rich sister. The engagement itself is being called into question, with the fiancé's family questioning the entire arrangement. I am writing this update from my friend Rachel's guest room. The Wilsons have shown their support, reminding me that true family does not treat you like an ATM. I have locked all of my accounts, and my lawyer is drafting cease and desist letters. What is the most difficult part? I don't feel anything. There is no guilt. There's no sadness. Just relief. It's as if I've finally laid down a burden I've been carrying my entire life. Perhaps that is what freedom feels like. Update 2. My Hawaii post has had an illuminating impact. What began as a family quarrel has revealed years of deception to a much larger audience than planned. 3 days after my previous post, I received an email from my sister's fiance's mother. We met in a quiet cafe in Manhattan. We had no idea, she said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. Your parents informed us that they were wealthy financial managers, and that your sister was taking a sabbatical from her concert piano career. They stated that this luxury vacation was a gift to both families. She revealed specifics concerning my family's dishonesty. They portrayed themselves as wealthy sophisticates, telling anecdotes about their great occupations and my sister's temporary hiatus from performing. The realization struck their family hard. James is devastated, she continued, not for the money, but for the lies. He confronted my sister about using my credit cards without authorization. She chuckled and stated, she's my sister, her money is family money. That evening, James ended their engagement. I can't build a life with someone who thinks it's okay to steal from and exclude their own sister, he told her. He returned the ring and walked away, his family fully supporting his decision. My sister's reaction was explosive. She recorded a lengthy Instagram live tirade blaming me for losing her chance at happiness, and when that failed to get traction, she began contacting my colleagues, spreading stories about how I abandoned my family during their time of need. However, her efforts backfired. My documented post had already made the rounds. People had seen the credit card statements, read the texts, and recognized the pattern of exploitation. Each fresh attack from her simply strengthened my narrative. My parents' professional consequences has been devastating. Dad's consulting customers began to distance themselves, Mom's social position in her charity circles plummeted, and their carefully cultivated image was broken. They've been trying to reach me via every imaginable method, and the tone of their messages alternates between appealing and demanding. We are still your parents. You can't just cut us off after all we've done for you. Your sister is devastated. How can you be so cruel? We'll pay you back, just give us time. They showed up at my workplace yesterday. Security turned them away, but not before Mom made a fuss in the lobby, wailing about her ungrateful daughter. My colleagues have been quite sympathetic, with several sharing their own experiences with family financial abuse. The Wilsons have been my rock throughout this. Mrs. Wilson helped me update all of my banking information and set up additional security measures, and Mr. Wilson is aiding me in documenting every unlawful transaction for possible legal action. Rachel's parents offered me their guest house for as long as I needed it. Family doesn't steal from family, Rachel's mom told me. And they certainly don't exclude their own daughter from family celebrations while spending her money. My sister's ex-fiancé's family has been surprisingly supportive, openly defending my actions and sharing their own experiences with my family's dishonesty. Their narrative has helped others understand the full extent of the manipulation. My parents sent me a big envelope today containing a promissory note for the Hawaii expenses, as well as a letter about healing our family bonds and moving forward together. They advised family therapy and regular meals to help re-establish trust. However, there was no acknowledgement of their decades of emotional abuse, or of how they'd methodically abused me while removing me from the family. The letter spoke of misunderstandings, as if $58,000 in illegal charges and a secret family celebration were simple mistakes. I returned the letter unopened, accompanied with a formal cease and desist notification from my lawyer. Some extended family members have attempted to mediate. They're still your parents, they explain. Family is family. But here's the thing, they've never treated me like family. I was their housekeeper, their ATM, their backup plan, never their daughter, sister, or true part of the family. I'm tired of being the family bank, the unseen support system, and sacrificing my financial and emotional security for people who see me as nothing more than a resource to be used. For the first time in my life, I am putting myself first. My money is my money, my time is my time, and my life is my life, which is extremely freeing. Update 3. It's been a month since my previous update, and I finally accomplished something I never imagined possible. Full tranquility. 2 weeks ago, my family made their final attempt at reconciliation, arriving to my apartment with photo albums and recital programs. The doorman refused to let them in, but they waited in the lobby for hours. We just want a reminder of the good times, Mom told the doorman, flipping through images of my sister's performances and pointing out shots where I might be seen in the background, usually hauling equipment or adjusting costumes. Dad attempted to contact my colleagues via LinkedIn. We're worried about our daughter's mental health, he wrote. She's cutting off her loving family over a simple misunderstanding about shared finances. My co-workers shared his mails to me, along with comments justifying my behavior. My sister's current social media technique has been to play the victim, creating videos about toxic individualism and how money destroys families, while carefully editing out the unauthorized charges and the secret engagement party. However, the comment sections are brimming with folks who have shared the entire narrative. The final straw came when they contacted the Wilsons to make me see reason. Mr. Wilson responded quickly and emphatically. "You've exploited her for years. Leave her alone. I've changed my phone number, shut down my accounts, and even pondered moving to another city. My therapist thinks I'm finally recovering my life, and for the first time in years, I feel liberated." They phoned the Wilsons to help me see reason. Mr. Wilson's response was perfect. "For 30 years, I've seen you treat her as nothing more than a convenience. She is finally appreciating herself as she should have been regarded all along. My lawyer has written formal letters requesting payback of all improper transactions, which totaled over $287,000 over 3 years. They claim everything was agreed upon and that I'm rewriting history. The bank's fraud department disagrees, and investigations are still ongoing. I've moved to a new apartment in a secure building, my mail has been routed through a screening agency, my phone number has changed, my email has rigorous filters, and my social media profiles have been cancelled or made private. Last week, I was offered a partnership track position, and the managing partner commented that my management of the family problem demonstrated the kind of backbone they look for in a leader. Without the continual drain of family expectations, I've been able to focus on my profession. Rachel's parents have informally adopted me. I have standing Sunday dinner invitations, and her mother keeps accidentally cooking too much food. They urge that I attend their annual Cape Cod vacation. Real family vacations don't involve stealing, Rachel's father quipped as we organized the trip. Mrs. Wilson has been helping me rediscover abandoned interests, and I've started taking photography classes, which I couldn't do in high school because it would have clashed with my sister's practice schedule. The Wilsons are still my steady mentors. The extended family is still pushing for reconciliation. But what about the holidays? What happens when your parents are older? These queries used to make me feel guilty. Now they just remind me of how one-sided our relationship was. My therapist pointed out that my family's behavior follows a common pattern of financial abuse, which is veiled by cultural expectations of familial obligation. "You're not breaking family bonds," I was told. "You're breaking free from exploitation." The most significant shift has occurred internally. The worry that used to follow every phone contact, email, and bank alert has vanished. I no longer flinch when my phone calls or feel terrible about spending my own money on myself. Last weekend, I bought an abstract painting that spoke to me, and as I hung it, I realized it was the first time I had bought something solely for myself, rather than for someone else. My sister's most recent post accuses me of being callous for abandoning family. Nevertheless, I have not abandoned family. Rather, I have discovered my true family. It's Rachel's parents asking about my day, and they mean it. It's the Wilsons honoring my accomplishments without expecting anything in return. My coworkers are the ones who never hesitate to defend me. Sometimes I think of that little girl who ironed concert dresses and made dinners to get attention, and I wish I could tell her she deserved more. That being useful is not synonymous with being loved. The real family does not treat you like an ATM. I'm not an ATM. I'm not a support system. I am not a resource to be used. I am free. I grew up overshadowed by the golden child. She tried to seduce my husband, we exposed her, and my mother framed me, refusing her faults. Hello, everyone, I need some help and maybe a place to rant. This will be a long one, so please bear with me. I, 33F, have always had a problematic connection with my younger sister, Julia, 30F. Julia is our family's golden child, which has caused me grief since we were little. Growing up, our parents always preferred Julia. She was the beautiful, talented, and all-around perfect person. Meanwhile, I was the older sister who consistently fell short of their expectations. My earliest memories include occasions when I felt invisible next to her. One memory strikes out so vividly. I was about 8 years old and it was my birthday. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, fantasizing about the cake, the gifts, and the attention. But as soon as Julia entered the room, everyone's attention went to her. She was just 5 at the time, but she had a talent for stealing the show. She began singing a song she had learned in kindergarten, and everyone applauded, completely forgetting that it was my special day. My parents didn't notice the tears welling up in my eyes as I watched them adore her. This was a pattern that continued throughout our childhood. Julia received the greatest clothes, the most attention, and all of the compliments. I recall feeling pleased of myself after receiving a B on a math test. However, when I presented it to my parents, they only glanced at it before asking Julia about her day. She had colored a picture at school, and that was considered more impressive. The hardest aspect was that Julia was well aware of her position within the family. She wasn't a malevolent child, but she knew how to use circumstances to her advantage. If we ever fought, as siblings do, she would scream and run to our parents, who would always support her side. I was always the one that got scolded, regardless of the situation. The dynamics remained rather stable as we grew older. Julia excelled in whatever she did. She was a straight-A student, a star athlete, and eventually a social butterfly with a large network of friends. In contrast, I suffered both intellectually and socially. I was shy, introverted, and had difficulty establishing friends. Our parents frequently compared us, always adversely to me. "Why can't you be more like Julia?" was a constant refrain in our home. High school was really stressful. Julia was a freshman when I was a senior, and she rapidly gained popularity. She joined the cheerleading squad, was chosen class president, and boys wanted to date her. I was the nerdy senior who rarely had any friends and spent the most of his time in the library. She seemed to be the center of my existence. One incident from high school still bothers me. There was a major dance coming up, and I had finally worked up the guts to ask a boy I liked to go with me. To my astonishment and happiness, he replied yes. But a week before the dance, he canceled, claiming he had invited someone else. Someone else turned out to be Julia. She had no idea I had asked him, but it didn't matter. She got to go to the dance with him, whilst I stayed at home, devastated and alone. After high school, I attended a local community college, while Julia received a scholarship to a prominent university. Our parents were understandably pleased of her, but it hurt to see how little they cared about my accomplishments. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my tuition, but Julia's expenses were covered by our parents. They paid her many visits, attended her college functions, and were continuously positive about her progress. Meanwhile, I had to fend for myself, both emotionally and financially. I eventually earned a nursing degree, while Julia went to law school. By then, I had learnt not to seek my parents' approval. I moved out, obtained a job, and attempted to establish a life for myself. But the agony of those early years never left me. Julia and I remained in touch, but our connection was strained. She was always the successful, attractive sister, but I was just myself. Fast forward a few years, I met a beautiful man named Alex and we married. For the first time in my life, I felt truly appreciated and cherished. Alex was aware of my family dynamics and was really helpful. He helped me realize my own worth beyond the shadows cast by my parents and sister. We purchased a home, and I began to feel like I could finally leave the past behind. But Julia returned to my life in an unexpected way. She had completed law school and was working for a respected firm. She became engaged to a man who seemed perfect in every aspect. Our parents were ecstatic and couldn't stop talking about the forthcoming wedding. I tried to be pleased for her, but old feelings of inadequacy and hatred came back. Julia asked me to be her maid of honor. I was taken aback. We weren't friends, and I questioned why she would want me in such an important capacity, but she insisted on rebuilding our connection. I reluctantly consented, believing that this would be an opportunity to repair old hurts. The wedding preparations were a nightmare. Julia was a bridezilla, demanding and domineering. Every choice had to go via her, and she frequently rejected my thoughts and proposals. It was evident that she had not changed much. She still desired to be the center of attention. But I gritted my teeth and went along with it, hoping to support her and even gain some of her favor. Next came the bridal shower. It was a spectacular event hosted by our parents and attended by Julia's numerous friends and colleagues. I felt out of place and uncomfortable, but I kept a brave face. During the event, our mother delivered a speech praising Julia to the skies. She stated how proud they were of her accomplishments and how attractive she appeared. I stood there, feeling invisible yet again. But then something unexpected occurred. Julia seized the microphone and began speaking. She thanked everyone for attending, then turned to face me. Her response was, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge my sister, who has always been there for me. I know I haven't always shown it, but I appreciate everything she's done. She's strong, kind, and an amazing person. I'm lucky to have her as my sister." I was stunned. Julia has never publicly recognized me like this before. Tears welled up in my eyes, and for a little minute, I believed our relationship could alter. Perhaps this was a tipping point. However, the goodwill was short-lived. Julia called me in a panic about a week before her wedding. She had misplaced the family heirloom necklace that our grandmother had given us, and she was scheduled to wear it on her wedding day. She was hysterical, and I dashed over to assist her in finding it. We flipped her place upside down and still couldn't find it. 2 days later, Julia called me again, accusing me of stealing the necklace. She claimed I must have taken it out of jealousy. I was astonished and hurt. All I had done was attempt to help her, and now she was accusing me of stealing. Of course, our parents believed her, as they usually did with Julia. I was devastated. Eventually, Julia discovered the necklace in a drawer she had forgotten about, but the damage had already occurred. She never apologized for accusing me, and neither did our parents. The wedding went on, but I felt like an outsider in my own family. After the wedding catastrophe, Alex and I chose to concentrate on our respective lives and families. Alex, who had always been technologically inclined, began researching ways to make money online. Initially, it was a side venture, but he quickly discovered a great formula and began earning thousands of dollars. Within a year, his web projects were bringing in tens of thousands, and our financial situation had much improved. With our newly acquired fortune, we purchased a stunning mansion in a famous area. Alex surprised me with a Bugatti as a symbol of our success, and we soon had 2 beautiful children. Life was great, or so it appeared. However, my parents remained unconcerned about our accomplishments. Despite Julia's recent marital issues, they paid her periodic visits and were more engaged in her life. Julia had been living on her own since her marriage ended and was struggling with her work. She had been laid off from a top legal firm and was struggling to make ends meet. Her jealousy grew worse when she saw our success. She came over one day, claiming to want to reconnect and spend time with her nieces and nephew. Initially, I believed her. I assumed she was sincerely attempting to restore our shattered relationship. However, it did not take long to learn her genuine objectives. She started dropping up unannounced, often when Alex was home alone. She would dress provocatively and make subtle, flirty comments to him. Alex, being the faithful spouse he is, quickly informed me of her behavior. We were both stunned and outraged by her conduct. Rather than address her immediately, we devised a strategy to reveal her true colors. We installed hidden cameras in the living room and other public locations to catch her in the act. It wasn't long until we obtained the evidence we required. Julia made her move one day while I was supposed to be out running errands. She approached Alex, placed her hand on his arm, and whispered provocative things into his ear. "Come on, Alex," she said. "You deserve someone who truly appreciates you. Someone like me." Alex played along just long enough to keep her talking. "Julia, you need to stop. I love my wife, and this is incredibly inappropriate." But Julia persisted, leaning closer. "She doesn't have to know. It'll be our little secret." That was the moment we'd been waiting for. Alex forcibly pushed her away, saying, "Julia, I'm serious. You need to leave. This is wrong on so many levels." We documented the entire event on camera. With the proof in hand, we decided to take action. First, we convened a family meeting, which included Julia's husband, who had been unaware of her activities. When everyone had gathered, we showed the video. The room was silent as the video aired. Julia's husband's face became red with rage, and my parents were completely astonished. The video concluded with a tense silence before Julia's husband stood up. "Julia, how could you? After everything, you try to seduce your own sister's husband?" His voice was full of surprise and hurt. Julia stammered, attempting to come up with an excuse, but there was no disputing what we had witnessed. Our parents looked at her, disappointed and disgusted. "Julia, we trusted you. We always believed you were the better daughter, but this is beyond forgiveness," my mother replied, her voice cracking. My dad shook his head. "You've brought shame to our family. I don't even know who you are anymore." Julia's husband promptly filed for divorce. He left that same day, accompanied by their 2 children. My parents, who had always elevated Julia to a pedestal, were forced to confront the truth of her behavior. They moved away from her, unable to look at her in the same manner again. Julia's world came crashing down. She has lost her husband, her children, and the support of our parents. She tried to reach out to me, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive her that readily. The scars were too fresh, and the treachery was too severe. Alex and I continued to construct our lives together, stronger than ever. Julia's betrayal, however terrible, had eventually brought us together. We knew we could handle anything as long as we had each other. Life went on, but the scars from the past remained. My parents, who had always preferred Julia, struggled to accept her conduct. They visited less frequently, and when they did, it was evident that they were still dealing with their disappointment. They attempted to appear normal, but the strain was evident. Julia, on the other hand, was attempting to gather up the pieces of her broken existence. She had lost her work and was struggling financially. Her attempts to reconnect with her husband had been unsuccessful, and he had filed for full custody of their children. She was alone and desperate. One day, she appeared at our door, looking more ragged and broken than I had ever seen her. She pleaded with me to let her in so she could explain. Despite my better judgment, I agreed. She sat at our kitchen table, tears flowing down her cheeks, admitting everything. "I'm so sorry," she wailed. "I've been jealous of you for so long. I saw how happy you were, how successful, and I couldn't stand it. I thought if I could take Alex away, I'd feel better. But I was wrong. I've lost everything." Her words struck me hard. For so long, I had regarded Julia as the favored one, the one who had everything. I never realized how deep her insecurities went. I felt sympathy and hatred, but mostly I was tired. Tired of the drama, the suffering, and the never-ending cycle of rivalry and animosity. "I don't know what to say, Julia," I said. "You've hurt me in ways I can't even begin to describe. But I can't keep living with this anger. It's poisoning me, and it's poisoning our family." Julia nodded, tears still running down her cheeks. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am." We sat quietly for a while, the weight of our common history hanging thick in the air. Julia eventually went, leaving me to my own thoughts. Could I ever really forgive her? Could we ever get past this? In the weeks that followed, I concentrated on my family and my personal recovery. Alex was a rock for me every step of the process. We discussed Julia, the past, and what the future might hold. I slowly began to let go of some of my anger and bitterness. I recognized that holding on to it was not benefiting anyone, least of all myself. Julia continued to struggle, but she started to make changes. She began going to therapy, getting a job, and rebuilding her relationship with her kids. It wasn't easy, and there were failures along the road, but she was making an effort, which was something. My parents remained distant. The golden child had fallen, and they had no idea how to deal with it. They continued to see Julia on occasion, but it was evident that nothing would ever be the same. They came to see us less and less, and when they did, the tension was evident. It seemed as if they didn't know how to interact to me without the usual dynamic of favoritism. One sunny afternoon, as I watched my children play in our lovely garden, I realized something profound. Despite everything, I was content. I had a nice husband, wonderful children, and a life I was pleased with. Julia's acts had been painful, but they had also brought me to a place of strength and resilience. In the end, life continued. The scars of the past would never be completely healed, but they did not have to define the future. Julia and I started to restore our connection gradually and cautiously. It wasn't perfect and never will be, but it was a start. For the time being, I've decided to focus on the now and the future. The past had its purpose, but it no longer kept me captive. Alex and I continued to create a life together full of love, laughter, and the occasional struggle. Our beautiful home exceeded all of our expectations. The mansion was huge, beautiful, and ideal for raising a family. The children enjoyed their new rooms and the wide backyard where they could play. Alex and I were happier than ever, and for a while, it appeared that we had put the turmoil behind. Part 3. An unexpected turn. Life seems to have settled into a peaceful rhythm. Julia and I worked hard on our relationship, and it gradually began to improve. She apologized sincerely, and I noticed a true improvement in her behavior. We began meeting for coffee, discussing our lives, and even planned family outings together. It was a relief to finally feel like I had a sister I could count on. Meanwhile, Alex's career soared. I grew up overshadowed by the golden child. She tried to seduce my husband, we exposed her, and my mother framed me, refusing her faults. Hello, everyone, I need some help and maybe a place to rant. This will be a long one, so please bear with me. I, 33F, have always had a problematic connection with my younger sister, Julia, 30F. Julia is our family's golden child, which has caused me grief since we were little. Growing up, our parents always preferred Julia. She was the beautiful, talented, and all-around perfect person. Meanwhile, I was the older sister who consistently fell short of their expectations. My earliest memories include occasions when I felt invisible next to her. One memory strikes out so vividly. I was about 8 years old and it was my birthday. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, fantasizing about the cake, the gifts, and the attention. But as soon as Julia entered the room, everyone's attention went to her. She was just 5 at the time, but she had a talent for stealing the show. She began singing a song she had learned in kindergarten, and everyone applauded, completely forgetting that it was my special day. My parents didn't notice the tears welling up in my eyes as I watched them adore her. This was a pattern that continued throughout our childhood. Julia received the greatest clothes, the most attention, and all of the compliments. I recall feeling pleased of myself after receiving a B on a math test. However, when I presented it to my parents, they only glanced at it before asking Julia about her day. She had colored a picture at school, and that was considered more impressive. The hardest aspect was that Julia was well aware of her position within the family. She wasn't a malevolent child, but she knew how to use circumstances to her advantage. If we ever fought, as siblings do, she would scream and run to our parents, who would always support her side. I was always the one that got scolded, regardless of the situation. The dynamics remained rather stable as we grew older. Julia excelled in whatever she did. She was a straight-A student, a star athlete, and eventually a social butterfly with a large network of friends. In contrast, I suffered both intellectually and socially. I was shy, introverted, and had difficulty establishing friends. Our parents frequently compared us, always adversely to me. "Why can't you be more like Julia?" was a constant refrain in our home. High school was really stressful. Julia was a freshman when I was a senior, and she rapidly gained popularity. She joined the cheerleading squad, was chosen class president, and boys wanted to date her. I was the nerdy senior who rarely had any friends and spent the most of his time in the library. She seemed to be the center of my existence. One incident from high school still bothers me. There was a major dance coming up, and I had finally worked up the guts to ask a boy I liked to go with me. To my astonishment and happiness, he replied yes. But a week before the dance, he canceled, claiming he had invited someone else. Someone else turned out to be Julia. She had no idea I had asked him, but it didn't matter. She got to go to the dance with him, whilst I stayed at home, devastated and alone. After high school, I attended a local community college, while Julia received a scholarship to a prominent university. Our parents were understandably pleased of her, but it hurt to see how little they cared about my accomplishments. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my tuition, but Julia's expenses were covered by our parents. They paid her many visits, attended her college functions, and were continuously positive about her progress. Meanwhile, I had to fend for myself, both emotionally and financially. I eventually earned a nursing degree, while Julia went to law school. By then, I had learnt not to seek my parents' approval. I moved out, obtained a job, and attempted to establish a life for myself. But the agony of those early years never left me. Julia and I remained in touch, but our connection was strained. She was always the successful, attractive sister, but I was just myself. Fast forward a few years, I met a beautiful man named Alex and we married. For the first time in my life, I felt truly appreciated and cherished. Alex was aware of my family dynamics and was really helpful. He helped me realize my own worth beyond the shadows cast by my parents and sister. We purchased a home, and I began to feel like I could finally leave the past behind. But Julia returned to my life in an unexpected way. She had completed law school and was working for a respected firm. She became engaged to a man who seemed perfect in every aspect. Our parents were ecstatic and couldn't stop talking about the forthcoming wedding. I tried to be pleased for her, but old feelings of inadequacy and hatred came back. Julia asked me to be her maid of honor. I was taken aback. We weren't friends, and I questioned why she would want me in such an important capacity, but she insisted on rebuilding our connection. I reluctantly consented, believing that this would be an opportunity to repair old hurts. The wedding preparations were a nightmare. Julia was a bridezilla, demanding and domineering. Every choice had to go via her, and she frequently rejected my thoughts and proposals. It was evident that she had not changed much. She still desired to be the center of attention. But I gritted my teeth and went along with it, hoping to support her and even gain some of her favor. Next came the bridal shower. It was a spectacular event hosted by our parents and attended by Julia's numerous friends and colleagues. I felt out of place and uncomfortable, but I kept a brave face. During the event, our mother delivered a speech praising Julia to the skies. She stated how proud they were of her accomplishments and how attractive she appeared. I stood there, feeling invisible yet again. But then something unexpected occurred. Julia seized the microphone and began speaking. She thanked everyone for attending, then turned to face me. Her response was, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge my sister, who has always been there for me. I know I haven't always shown it, but I appreciate everything she's done. She's strong, kind, and an amazing person. I'm lucky to have her as my sister." I was stunned. Julia has never publicly recognized me like this before. Tears welled up in my eyes, and for a little minute, I believed our relationship could alter. Perhaps this was a tipping point. However, the goodwill was short-lived. Julia called me in a panic about a week before her wedding. She had misplaced the family heirloom necklace that our grandmother had given us, and she was scheduled to wear it on her wedding day. She was hysterical, and I dashed over to assist her in finding it. We flipped her place upside down and still couldn't find it. 2 days later, Julia called me again, accusing me of stealing the necklace. She claimed I must have taken it out of jealousy. I was astonished and hurt. All I had done was attempt to help her, and now she was accusing me of stealing. Of course, our parents believed her, as they usually did with Julia. I was devastated. Eventually, Julia discovered the necklace in a drawer she had forgotten about, but the damage had already occurred. She never apologized for accusing me, and neither did our parents. The wedding went on, but I felt like an outsider in my own family. After the wedding catastrophe, Alex and I chose to concentrate on our respective lives and families. Alex, who had always been technologically inclined, began researching ways to make money online. Initially, it was a side venture, but he quickly discovered a great formula and began earning thousands of dollars. Within a year, his web projects were bringing in tens of thousands, and our financial situation had much improved. With our newly acquired fortune, we purchased a stunning mansion in a famous area. Alex surprised me with a Bugatti as a symbol of our success, and we soon had 2 beautiful children. Life was great, or so it appeared. However, my parents remained unconcerned about our accomplishments. Despite Julia's recent marital issues, they paid her periodic visits and were more engaged in her life. Julia had been living on her own since her marriage ended and was struggling with her work. She had been laid off from a top legal firm and was struggling to make ends meet. Her jealousy grew worse when she saw our success. She came over one day, claiming to want to reconnect and spend time with her nieces and nephew. Initially, I believed her. I assumed she was sincerely attempting to restore our shattered relationship. However, it did not take long to learn her genuine objectives. She started dropping up unannounced, often when Alex was home alone. She would dress provocatively and make subtle, flirty comments to him. Alex, being the faithful spouse he is, quickly informed me of her behavior. We were both stunned and outraged by her conduct. Rather than address her immediately, we devised a strategy to reveal her true colors. We installed hidden cameras in the living room and other public locations to catch her in the act. It wasn't long until we obtained the evidence we required. Julia made her move one day while I was supposed to be out running errands. She approached Alex, placed her hand on his arm, and whispered provocative things into his ear. "Come on, Alex," she said. "You deserve someone who truly appreciates you. Someone like me." Alex played along just long enough to keep her talking. "Julia, you need to stop. I love my wife, and this is incredibly inappropriate." But Julia persisted, leaning closer. "She doesn't have to know. It'll be our little secret." That was the moment we'd been waiting for. Alex forcibly pushed her away, saying, "Julia, I'm serious. You need to leave. This is wrong on so many levels." We documented the entire event on camera. With the proof in hand, we decided to take action. First, we convened a family meeting, which included Julia's husband, who had been unaware of her activities. When everyone had gathered, we showed the video. The room was silent as the video aired. Julia's husband's face became red with rage, and my parents were completely astonished. The video concluded with a tense silence before Julia's husband stood up. "Julia, how could you? After everything, you try to seduce your own sister's husband?" His voice was full of surprise and hurt. Julia stammered, attempting to come up with an excuse, but there was no disputing what we had witnessed. Our parents looked at her, disappointed and disgusted. "Julia, we trusted you. We always believed you were the better daughter, but this is beyond forgiveness," my mother replied, her voice cracking. My dad shook his head. "You've brought shame to our family. I don't even know